Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, and greetings, whichever part of the world you are in. Thanks for dialing in. This is 6 p.m. India time, so we are starting on time now. This is the day one and the second session in which we are going to talk a little bit about the advances in AI. And we have 4 speakers lined up here. We will be starting with Vishal from IBM, followed by Suparna from HP Enterprises. We'll be joined by Nishant from Visa, and then Ajay from Walmart Labs, and this will be followed by a panel discussion. So let me just introduce our first speaker this evening. And Vishal is the Asia Pacific leader, part of the technical elite team for data warehousing and AI at IBM. And he has been in the industry for more than 20 years in tech and leadership, and he specializes in Watson cognitive products. So I will not stand between you and an interesting session coming up from Vishal. So I will hand it over to Vishal to talk about his topic. And he's going to talk about advances in enterprise AI platforms for the new digital economy. And I don't think we could have got a more apt topic than him. So Vishal, over to you. I will stop sharing from my side so that maybe you can share your deck.
Just confirm you can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Greetings, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. I'll straight away dive into the section that I'm going to cover. Let me set the stage for this one. So I'm going to cover advances in enterprise AI platforms for the new digital economy. So setting the context, if you look at the usage of AI in enterprise AI environment, there are 3 kind of buckets if we see them today. And in all the buckets, it is the data that is driving the need for AI. It's not as if we want to go for AI, but it's more about data is the driving factor. So let's start from left to right. At the left, if you look at it, the first bucket where we see AI getting used is enriched interaction kind of a scenario, wherein you have bots, chatbots, digital bots, and assistive kind of bots, which are enriching the interaction that you're having with the end user. Then there is the second bucket wherein you are empowering the advisors, wherein you are augmenting the skills, the abilities of a person who's going to use AI, augmented by a lot of data being churned out in through deep learning and machine learning algorithms. The third bucket we see going and getting used is the optimized back office. This is where we see, this is a bucket wherein a lot of your operations that happen at the back end that are needing optimization. The optimization is going to be driven or is already getting driven by AI. So these are the 3 buckets where we see AI is getting used today. And the 4 themes that are driving from a data point of view is, one is virtual data. There is a more and more requirement today that you don't have to physically move the data to the AI. Essentially, AI should be able to use data virtually from anywhere it exists. The second one is modernization, wherein can you modernize the data adoption, usage, and governance in this whole AI lifecycle. The concept of data ops itself is pretty much maturing now for enterprises. And that is leading to a situation wherein this whole thing should come about into a theme called industry add-ons to AI. So we talk about AI services today, but pretty soon we'll start seeing, we are already seeing some themes around it, but we'll start seeing more of industry add-ons to AI rather than just the cognitive set of services that we see today. But if I was to say where does the business opportunity exist today in the digital economy and where we see growth is going to happen and where the changes are going to affect that growth is, if you look at this chart, a little busy chart, but look at the numbers there. If you were to map to the buckets that I talked about now, the front office is the bucket which is interactive chatbots and digital assistants, etc. This is where 44% of the work is happening on this, and the cost saving is 44% there. Let's not go into the numbers of how billions we are saving, but this is where a lot of effort is going. Middle office is the one where the most amount of effort is going. But you know where the growth is going to happen? It's going to happen on the back office part of it. This is where the advances are coming around. That's what the chart portrays. If you look at the kind of use cases that is, getting on a maturity from a lower curve to the most mature, conversational agents are kind of pretty mature on the front office. Similarly, the risk and fraud kind of use cases in middle office. Back office, they're like credit underwriting. But things like smart contracts, things like inquisitive business process management, things like hyper-personal insights, those are the ones that are going to drive it. But the main theme on this chart is it is the back office work that's going to have adoption on AI, where advances are being seen, and the digital economy is driving those advances. But if we were to put it together to say what are the kind of expectations that when we say new digital economy from AI, one is it should be deployable anywhere. It is more and more getting used in a scenario wherein the consistent, secure supply chain of data software should be there. So you are expecting today that AI should not be available as a service. It might even be available as something of a payload on an edge device, right? Integration upon provisioning, seamless look and feel, and user experience being augmented. This is the other requirement today. We have gone beyond the time when we were looking up to consuming AI through a set of services or a set of models, etc. I think it is going towards an era wherein we're saying, is there a building block fashion wherein AI can discover the services it needs to really build the solution for you, and the integration can happen upon the provisioning itself. The third most important driving factor for new digital economy that we're seeing is you want to query anything, anywhere safely. I often come across requirements in the field today wherein we're seeing data is actually being consumed not only through a traditional method of JDBC or DBC connectivity, it is actually being asked through stitching it together from a JDBC connection and the REST API, and in a seamless fashion, in a safe fashion. The other thing that I already talked about was the user experience has to be augmented. I today as a user should not be seeing AI as a block to me wherein I don't know what is happening behind the block, but it should be augmented experience for me in such a way that it is able to establish trust for me. So I should be able to audit it, look at the bias in the data, de-bias it, etc. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but these are the driving factors that we see in the new digital economy that are expected out of AI, especially when you start using it more and more on the back office and the middle office kind of scenario. Now, one of the things that we have done, because the Red Hat coming on board with us, is that IBM always had middleware which allowed us to build once. But more importantly, now we have an ability which allows us to deploy anywhere. And if I was to really project it as a logical architecture for all the people, if you see the red layer here, that's the layer that allows us to actually deploy anywhere. So when I say anywhere, it means it is private cloud, public, in a hybrid mode, on-prem, the traditional way we used to do. But more importantly, when you deploy it, you can deploy the AI middleware. And this is an important word here. We're seeing AI will not be services anymore. AI will be a middleware which should be deployable anywhere. So what that means is you're building once. Let's say you're building a model once for a scalability which is going to run on a mid-size server environment. But if you want to run the same model without changing your whole DevOps cycle or even the machine learning ops on top of that, can you really pick up the same solution and deploy it on an edge kind of a scenario wherein the models are being served from the central server to the edge devices without changing a piece of code? We're talking these kind of scenarios wherein you're building just once and deployment is taken care of by the underlying hybrid multi-cloud platform. The second thing that's coming around when you deploy this kind of thing is that AI, let me emphasize again, is not being seen services, but as a modular building blocks. So earlier we were building solutions in such a way that you would have services integrated together to really arrive at end user solution that we want to build. Today we are running into an era wherein if you have building blocks and you have an AI management system on top of that to really manage the ops around it, based on how you define a solution, the building blocks can be formed together in such a way that you don't need certain set of services, they should switch off, and you need a certain set of services at some point of time, this is switch on. A typical scenario being if you're looking at a bank, most times, a simple scenario, let me run you by that, is you would actually do your data load into your data lakes, etc. at night, and you would run some kind of segmentation model on top of that once your data is loaded. What is happening in today's scenario when you look at AI as a modular building block is the same set of infrastructure is shifting itself to perform the data load into a data lake, and at a later point of time, instead of invoking a different set of infrastructure and services, the same set of services can modulate itself to actually become machine learning set of blocks. So you would have the data load finishing, and in an autonomous mode, the AI blocks kick in and start doing all kind of machine learning on top of that. So you are going away from a services mode into a modular block AI mode. The modernized part actually is leading to a third kind of a requirement, which says your information architecture that we used to talk in the era of data warehouses is not going to go away. It should be such that it works anywhere. So let me give you an example. Let's say the way we profess you adopt AI is through an AI ladder approach, wherein you have a way to go maturity step by step. You do a collect, which is more about making data simple and accessible from anywhere through virtualization. Then you organize the data into cataloging, governance, etc. Then you analyze it with BI, advanced analytics, deep learning, machine learning, and then you infuse it through models like on the edge, etc. But when you actually adopt this cycle in a deployment scenario that we see in cloud today, let's say if I was to horizontally lay it out and say these are the cycles or these are the steps, and there are different personas to really do those steps or undertake those steps. What we're seeing is the collect most of the time is happening on-prem and on a private cloud. Organize is happening mostly private cloud, some portions of it on-prem. Analyze, infuse part of the AI is mostly happening on public cloud. But what does this lay out for us? What this lays out for us is you're always, when you're using AI, different cycles of adoption, you're always having a movement of data and movement of metadata around that data, right? Now, there's an issue with that. Why? Because you do not want to take data to AI. Is there a way I can bring AI to the data? So let's lay it out a little differently. Is there a way, when I look at the information architecture around how AI is going to get used in this kind of a layout, is I can do a data virtualization. I don't care whether my data is lying in a CSV file, on a database, through a REST API, on a private cloud or a public cloud. I'm just making a connectivity, consuming that in an AI solution. That's what it is coming to. What that means is there'll be no more physical movements of data coming to AI. AI can go where the data is through data virtualization. The second most important thing that's happening on top of that, as soon as you start doing it, we're seeing that advances have come to such an extent that AI has to start cataloging the data it is dealing with. Today, data scientists control the data. They only know the catalog of the data, the columns, the governance around it, etc. We're talking about a cycle wherein AI or the machine learning itself is infused into how you build the data catalogs. It recognizes where your data assets lie, what kind of data assets those are, and then it applies governance on top of that in such a way it is more of a self-service governance. It knows which is the accessible data versus non-accessible, what kind of policies and rules to apply, and the user experience when you're using data through an information architecture is unified. You're not really bothering about what kind of services am I using, how am I putting it together. Is there a user interface for me as a consumer? Either I am a technical consumer or a business user. It should be unified for me. I do not have to really worry about what kind of a language, code, etc. that has to run on the back end. And when we see that, what we're coming to is we are actually coming to a scenario wherein AI has to work for AI. So one of the most popular terms for different organizations use different terms, but we here use something called auto AI. So is there a way the whole development process that I have around data as well as the AI cycle or the machine learning off cycle, can I actually use AI within that cycle? So if you were to use auto AI, what that means is the whole left side of the graph that you see, the different steps that you are having to do, right, which used to take weeks to months, can actually be done by AI, applying AI on top of itself within a few minutes. What that gives you, it gives an added advantage that you can get started without having to write a single piece of code. So AI will recognize the data for you, it will catalog the data for you, it will govern the data for you, but more importantly, it will find the features. It can even do feature engineering for you, hyperparameter optimization for you. It can find the right ensemble of models that you need to run, the best output that you can gain out of that, and whole cycle is completed. Not to say that as engineers or humans, we will not have to intervene and look at that code and probably optimize it further, but you have a very, very low entry point to be able to use AI. So the advance that is happening is such that the business user would be able to onboard AI themselves much, much, much faster. The kind of things that also are happening, that the AI ops part per se, when you're using an auto AI kind of functionality, should not be a black box. It should be visible to us as to how the feature engineering was done, where the we call those experiments, as in you feed the data, run an experiment, the model comes out, and you really want to see where the progress is, where the optimization is happening on parameters, which features are getting transformed, etc., etc. So it has the capability to do the whole cycle from the collect part to infuse part. The most important part, the most important part for advance in AI and an enterprise platform kind of scenario are those 4 requirements that we come across very, very often. One is there should be a way to have fairness, in the sense the platform should have an ability to be free from bias, as well as be able to de-bias either the data or the model that you're running. The second most important is there should be explainability built into the system, right? It should be whatever is being produced as an output, whether it is a model or it is an intermediate piece of data, it should be understood by the users as well as the developers. And third important part is, since you are able to have fairness and explainability, you might as well need auditability around it. Which data came to us, what changes did we make to the data, led to which algorithm, to which model, the whole lineage. So we earlier used to call that as data lineage. Today there is a machine learning lineage along with data lineage that is needed. The whole auditability cycle should be there. And there should be a value alignment around it. Very important in the sense that so the outcome, what is good in one industry scenario, may be a bad decision in a different industry scenario. So we should be able to really map it to the true business scenario we want to achieve, rather than a purely machine learning term of what is good versus what is bad, what is good score versus bad score. So the value alignment system should be built into your platform such a way that based on business scenario, the good and bad can be decided. I'm showing you a screenshot of the kind of systems that are being built for platforms that have this capability, like what we call as the Watson OpenScale, that allow you to have a trusted AI in such a way that any model you build and deploy through it, and doesn't have to be an IBM model only, it can be actually through multiple different set of services on Azure or AWS, wherever you have it deployed. Those can be evaluated, bias detection can be done, de-biasing can be done so that the data is balanced, right? You can have an explainability around it, and you can keep on validating the model while it is being run, scored, etc. What does it lead to, right? It leads to situations wherein you are able to find that did somebody tamper with it, right? The data or the model, right? You are able to really be able to find whether there is fairness in it. If there is no fairness in the outcome of the AI, you can obviously go to a de-biasing stage wherein you say, how can I balance my data as well as the model output that comes out of that? And once the decisions are coming out of the system, you really are in a position today to be able to find explainability to say, if I was, as a client, I was allowed for a loan application to go through, what were the factors that allowed that? What was the weightage of each of those factors? Was there a correlation between certain factors, etc., etc.? So these are the most important advances that have happened. These are today in production on enterprise scale. such a way that all the different points that I just talked about, those are being demanded in the field. Those are coming as one of the key requirements or a base requirement that is asked out of an AI system today. And that is something expected to mature more and more as we go forward. I will end my session here. Thank you.
Thanks, Vishal. I think that was very interesting point of views. We do have about 10 minutes there, so I will request the attendees, if they have any questions, they can write to us in the Q&A window here so that we can have Vishal address them. Vishal, I had one or two questions that I wanted to get your thought process on. So while we were talking about the whole statistical inference and basically looking at how we have looked at, let's say, a Bayesian way of AI, we are able to establish a kind of an audit trail there. We are still able to say how did we get to the results. So the whole explainability and the auditability is fairly well established in that. The moment we get into a deep learning mode, it becomes kind of difficult for us to explain. It is almost like talking to an expert who can give the expert perspective but cannot always explain how did she or he come up with an answer there. What are your thoughts into, with these two seem to be at the crossroads, while the whole deep learning revolution has kind of taken the AI, especially the machine learning, to the new levels. On the other hand, we have the whole ethics and fairness and explainability and auditability coming and questioning that. Are they likely to meet, and are we likely to find some solutions in the near term?
So let me address in a reverse order to say, do we have mature enough solution to be able to address them? I would say we have kind of a midlife maturity kind of thing. I think maturity still needs to come into fairness being one of the things that can be put in a very, very black and white thing. But let me tell you, this is something of a requirement that is actually coming into even official RFPs if you start that way, right? Earlier era, we used to have this data lineage as a requirement. I think today there is this combination of data lineage and ML lineage, that is. So what you covered was the ML lineage part that we are able to establish. And it doesn't have to be enterprise platform by the vendors like us. Even there are open source kits available to be able to do that. I think what is happening is when you run it at scale, so assuming in an organization you're going to run like 500 models that are going to be scored in night and maybe, a few real-time scoring models that you're running. At that kind of scale, how every time the model is getting run, how do you establish explainability for every decision that goes out? And then every explainability also has to be mapped to say which was the data that was loaded into a data lake that led to this training, that led to this decision. That is becoming critical, especially in I can name banking, healthcare, you name it. Pretty soon, when you get into a hyper personalization, even retail will start asking for it. Customers are going to ask if this offer is good, bad, ugly for me, and everybody is becoming aware of AI. This fairness is not that much of an issue as of today. It's more about, can I establish how this decision came about?
Fair enough, yeah. And I have one more question, and I'm still looking at the... So one of the things that, for example, the whole element of human judgment as we speak of, for example, you and I might be presented with exactly same scenario, and we might come up with two recommendations. Let's say if I am a bank officer who is doing a risk assessment, I have the FICO score or I have the credit rating there, and I have the same data, but we might still come up with a two different rating and say go or a no-go there. And in many cases, it's a human judgment that we are really talking about there. And when it comes to really an algorithm kind of coming with that, there could be the initial kind of a background or a starting bias that might be there as a researcher, right? Because all of us have our own points of views. I mean, we have heard of things like how a self-driving car who was not really used to looking at a colored skin, and then that's why it ended up kind of having an accident there. How does that role really play into, because on one hand we call that as the beauty of a human judgment, that we human beings are able to, we may not be able to explain it today, mathematically at least, or logically, but we are at least able to make decisions that seem to work for a large part. But now we are actually unwittingly or involuntarily seeding that bias. as a researcher, and not in the data per se, but in the way we are kind of designing it. And it's a classical researcher's bias sort of a thing there. What would be your thoughts on that one, Vishal?
Totally agree. I mean, this is something that is there. I think where this is going to go is, or at least going the way we see in the field today, it is one, there is no certification authority as of now to say that you have built a model certain way and we can stamp it to say it has all the fairness, etc. But I think an SOP kind of a thing is coming around to say, what is your standards when you would be able to produce a model and be able to say it has met those standards, right? So those steps today do not exist, but there is a humongous amount of discussion and work happening to say, is there a standard you and me can agree on to say, no matter how you build your model, what data you use, if it meets this standard, we are okay with it, right? The other thing that's happening that when I see more and more uses of AI is, I think AI will not be used as a whole. It'll be used as a pieces kind of a thing. So for example, let's say the biggest adoption use case today for AI is automation plus AI. So you will have automation steps being automated through an RPA kind of a software, but each of those data points that is getting collected is driven by AI. So AI is not getting used as a whole, but to augment a certain step in a process. So wherein, again, coming from the same fear that we do not want to give it to a black box, the whole process, but we probably want to use that as an augmentation point for data as of now. That's where the amount of use cases are coming, and that's for deep learning. Machine learning, advanced analytics has been in usage for almost a decade now, wherein it has matured because of the data warehouse and data marts having a lot of data. But I think what is going with deep learning models having the whole say about how the output should come.
Great. I think we just have time for one more question, Vishal. Krishna has a question in the chat window. He says, how do you think AI models developed using one country's data is consumed by other countries? And if so, how?
Excellent question. It's like you can't test a vaccine in one country and probably think that it can apply to the other country. Your population type and everything changes, right? So you need to have your phase 3 trial for each vaccination in India as well as the other countries where it's going to be adopted, right? So same thing. I believe the features that exist in data for a population set or country doesn't apply to the other country. Same way, for example, the banking rules that apply to European Union doesn't apply in India. Right?
So does that mean that the countries, or let us say if I am doing something with the genetic or personalized drugs, as like a lot of movement is going there, if I am a part of a genetic pool that is a very small portion, I will probably never be able to get, or it will be very difficult to get to a statistically significant kind of a results that will allow me to really leverage the data for my gene pool.
Precisely. I think this is where this whole transfer learning concept and other things come to say, is there a way? And so this is where I was talking about the industry add-ons, which will come to a point of time wherein we believe that you will have industry add-on with transfer learning from, let's say, one country. But then you would apply your own local data on top of that to really come to the last few layers, that deep learning to be very specific to your requirement, your population set, etc. I see today that in AI there are the transfer learning is very specific to a very specific technical field or an architecture. It is not coming towards an industry kind of a scenario wherein I can say I can transfer learn weight from, let's say, healthcare architecture, which has been proven in one society or a country, and I can bring it to a country like India and apply it directly. That kind of thing is still to take off, and that's stuck. Why? Because you would not really want to pick up this whole set of data and layers and metadata if you do not you can't explain it or you don't believe the fairness.
Okay. So last 30-second question, Vishal. We are talking about advances in AI. What should be the key takeaway for the audience of this conference? Should they embrace and look eagerly forward to AI, or should they be scared of AI? What camp do you suggest them to be part of?
I think we are willing or unwilling. We are participants of AI. So in one of the conferences, I was showing a demonstration. Every time we are using one of the devices, every time we are using a map, we are participant of AI. There is no going back to it, or there is no choice of it. I think we have to be conscious of how we are getting used. We are the product for AI today, right? Our data, the personalized data, is the one that's going to be productized tomorrow. I think consciousness around the advances that have happened will make us more aware and take away all the biases we have towards AI.
So if you don't see the product, you are the product, right?
That kind of product. You are.
Well, with that note, thanks a lot, Vishal. We would like to thank you for the time you have taken. It's been amazing chatting with you and listening to you. This is the virtual memento, given that we are in the digital world today. Thanks a lot, and please welcome to stay on for the rest of the session there. Thank you, Vishal, once again.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, let's keep moving now, and we have the second speaker here, Dr. Suparna Bhattacharya, and she comes with a lot of accomplishment. She has been at IBM for the last 21 years. Well, I wish I could count a company that I worked for that long, actually. And she has worked at HP prior to that for 5 years. And she's part currently of the AI Research Lab. And she did her PhD in Institute of Sciences. She has filed 35 patents, and she has more than 25 peer-reviewed publications. Today in the talk, she's going to talk to us about bridging the missing middle in AI with a self-learning data foundation. So I'm pretty intrigued by the topic itself in terms of the missing middle. What is it that is really the missing middle? And I would look forward to listening to Suparna's views on that. So Suparna, please take it away from here, and I hope you're able to share that, and please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be here today. And I think kind of Vishal gave the clue for, for what is the missing middle here, but let's go ahead with it. And maybe it kind of stole my thunder, but let's talk about that. So this is so I have as I said, I've had a lot of background mostly in system software, and I come from a system software background, worked in storage and system software for a long time. So I look at this area a little bit differently. I moved to the AI Research Lab in HP very recently, but I have been thinking about this problem for a while. And so the thing that intrigues me, about AI today is, I know we say a lot of, we've seen phenomenal advances in all of this time, and but if you ask somebody who is on the ground, who's trying to build these things, would you agree that the data is still the Achilles heel of AI? So it's the new oil, but it's also the Achilles heel. So even after generations of huge, big data platforms, scalable data management, Hadoop, Spark, Ray, object stores, key value stores, and all of these things, and streaming pipeline and streaming frameworks. With all of this ability to manage big data, parse big data, run through that, phenomenal advances in deep learning, and that means, as you say, you should not really it can learn representations, and so you don't really have to do much of hard-coded feature engineering, and you have all of this computational power to and one of good example, I think, is NLP area. The way we used to do NLP even a few years back, maybe 5 years back, and how the way we do it now because of these deep learning, transformer models, which kind of learn the whole language by looking through entire Wikipedia, is very, very impressive. And then we have had like huge advances in the area of, just the data integration, wrangling, labeling tools, and this whole rise of auto ML or auto AI, whatever you might call it, which says, just magically give me, your data, and I'm going to figure out the features, I'm going to figure out the models, and I'm going to give you the outcome you desired. But when you try to work on the ground, solving a problem, it certainly, I think everybody would realize it. It's still the situation that data scientists spend a huge amount of the time looking at the data when they really want to go with the coolest AI model and, and tune that. One example I want to talk, a few examples here was, from a few years back, very simple example, like trying to look at the equivalent of an auto ML, auto feature engineering tool, and said, okay, why don't we try it out with disk failure prediction and say, look for the data that we have collected from column logs. And this was, colleagues of mine who were looking at that. And so they kind of reached out to the team which had that data, and then you suddenly realize that it's not really that easy to get the data in that set of features. You first have to parse it, and then you have to get it in that format, and then they are different from different systems and so forth. So it took a while. And after doing all of that and getting all of the data from all of the sources and building and then giving it to this tool, which looked at all of these features and, build a model for prediction, best possible that it could, it still didn't really perform, very well in actually predicting failures. Go back, dig deep, and see that, actually what happens was that the biggest indicator, maybe one of the most easiest, clearest indicator is the smart failure messages that you get right from the disk. That wasn't there as part of the data. That was there in some event log file, textual event log file, and deep within that, that information was there. So if you don't really have the data that you really need, then all of this kind of becomes difficult. At the other end, you can look at autonomous driving use cases where you have all of these, where you, as you say, right, you collect a huge amount of this data, all of these videos, everything in high resolution, because you cannot afford to miss something important. So, and the problem is after a while it starts to get huge, right? So now you have customers who have like hundreds of petabytes of this data, and you're wondering, how do I really manage that, and how do I focus on what's important there? And then once, even if you build something, then there is this whole issue of model monitoring and so forth, because things can drift. And one interesting example is this IoT sensor. Like, so if you build a model for one of my colleagues was saying, they built a model for pump bearings, and what happened is once you start to add new sensors, and if they're mounted a little bit differently, and suddenly everything, all the models kind of goes haywire, and everybody deals with it in a different way. And so you really don't want to go back, and it's too expensive to go back and fix that mounting. It's better to solve it in software, but it's kind of tricky to standardize it. But all of these, you seem like, okay, there are, small things, they can be sorted out. But if you look at my experience actually with, with trying to apply AI in the time of COVID, I think many of us have, when I just moved to the AI research lab, all this happened, and there was a lot of, initiative within HPE as outside as well in the community to say, okay, if you're AI, working on AI, can you do something to help with COVID? And so the thing is, there is a much bigger talks on this subject, but what I want to focus on here is really, we had this huge community of data scientists, everybody who, and, AI experts who wanted to really contribute, and they pitched in to, contribute. So it's a very decentralized community. Some people working on their own laptops, on their cloud, on their systems. And you've had all of these data sets which were being prepared and given out. So I was working, for example, on the area of NLP, looking at how, as the COVID research was evolving, how do you, answer questions and actually find out patterns about how those questions and answers are actually changing over time. What are we learning? And it's not easy for us to really build on each other's work. Right. So, and at the other side, you have domain experts who have the knowledge and the know-how. They can validate things. They can come up with hypotheses. But everywhere there was this whole thing that we really wanted a rapid turnaround. You want rapid hypothesis generation. You want rapid, tuning of these models and algorithms. And you really want to build on each other's work. So what was preventing us, right? So if we really have all of this metadata, all of this lineage, all of this information about what's going on, it should have been magically available. But that was the problem. So even when people put up these things saying, okay, this is my, I have done this extraction, I've come up with this embeddings, you can go ahead and use it, or somebody goes and says, okay, I have actually come up with this named-entity resolution, and I actually had to run several times of training, and then, in some cases for generating embeddings, you run inferences several times. But it's not easy to use it because you pick something up and you try it out and it doesn't work for you, for your data, because you don't know the conditions under which it has really been developed. And so you see this whole process kind of amplified in this situation, and you really wish there was somebody kind of looking over, and somehow if we had like a collective memory being built out that we could all work together on. And just to give a little bit of a deeper picture of this, again, just to indicate the complexity of this. So there is the individual processes, and then there is also the full, chain of discovery. Right? So there is chemical structure discovery, like you can use a graph neural network to figure out which molecules which small molecules bind with which proteins and figure out candidate drugs. Then you go to an HPC system and then do deep simulation on the HPC system to really find out if they talk together. You go to a knowledge graph to find out whether those, which connects all of the data, chemical databases and medical databases and biological databases to see what are the side effects, what is the mechanism, how does this work? And then you say, okay, this is not enough because it's a new disease and we have literature coming in and we really need to bring that in. So you also want to connect across all of these things. And so really, if there was a way, and all of this data, additionally, they're residing in different places. Clinical data is a privacy sensitive data, so it's kind of really, you kind of have it as edge sites at the hospitals. You can't transfer that. You have scientific repositories, you have the public cloud data, and you have your HPC clusters. So you have this true convergence, and you have these two dimensions of complexity to deal with. And if that's not enough, there are new challenges compared to traditional data management. As we see, look at AI, containerization, and edge-to-cloud platforms. There is, of course, the informatics bottleneck, right? How do you really process the data? The models are getting more computational overhead. You're having bigger models. Feeding data to AI training, if you want to feed huge amounts of data, that's a bottleneck. Data gravity, edge to cloud, whether you move data to AI or AI to data, that decision has to be made automatically, preferably. Dynamic operations, both in terms of containers kind of moving around or in terms of things being very different in production versus, when you train the model. Collaborative sharing and explainability and all of these things again come into the picture, as Vishal really nicely pointed out. So what can you do? What do you really want? You wish this collective memory, this data foundation, somehow it could somehow serve your data that is valuable for AI instead of all the information. If it could figure that out somehow, if it could somehow get the right compute to move to the data. So for example, if I'm getting these new versions of data and then we figured out the right cleaning strategy for that, can that right thing move to that compute? And can that compute move close to where the data is ingested, close to the edge, because you automatically remember that that's what it needs. Or, very simple. I mean, we have had there is a lot of work on reusing, computations, but somehow if you do not really have this connected metadata across all of these environments, you still are not able to do that, but it could be really nice if it could just automatically recall whatever you've computed before but forgotten about. And then finally, if you could somehow trust this data foundation layer to automatically recommend improvements to AI pipelines, kind of say, okay, this is what is going wrong, this is not right, this is not explainable, and so forth. So what do you need for doing that, and what's the missing middle? Right? So I think so you have these two pieces, right? So we have AI pipelines on top, and you have the data storage or data layer at the bottom. Data storage and these kinds of data management systems are still optimized for reliable, secure, and efficient data access, which is great. But as we see, AI consumers need a lot more than that. What do AI consumers need? You need the data, you want the data that will give you reliable, trustworthy, high-quality outcomes. And you need it in a certain form, and you need it at a certain time. And you need a systematic way to make that happen. So at the top, you do have a lot of developments. So we have the data science and MLOps platforms at the top, and there are lots of them out there, which are trying to solve parts of the problem. And then we have data management platforms at the bottom. But it's a very complex and fragmented ecosystem. Right? There are just so many of them out there. And somewhere in between, we seem to have a tower of people. If you look at the COVID example, right, I give that example because it's very interesting. It's not one particular platform, one particular system, because your data can start anywhere, models can start anywhere, get imported anywhere else, and so forth. Right? So the journey can traverse many different pipelines, many different environments. So what you would really want to somehow have this collective memory. And if you can do that, then what you can do is, continuous you have CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development. But what matters for AI is continuous value. So you can get continuous value. So what you want is really the AI consumers should be able to benefit, from whatever you have learned from the experience across all the applications over the lifetime of data. And at the bottom, you want to be able to really prioritize high-quality data outcomes throughout the whole journey, from data transfer, retention, provisioning, and processing of AI. And so what do you need in the middle? So, we have Lineage, we have this metadata, but they're kind of locked today in many different silos. And there have been tools which have attempted to connect them. But maybe what might work better is something like Git. A Git-like model, which is widely adopted, can give us a means so that you can actually have this metadata tracked along with the data and along with the code, so that you can seamlessly manage, distribute, share, and interpret this metadata across diverse environments. And if you can do that, then there is a lot that can be learned from the metadata to really optimize the whole pipeline. And we'll talk about a few examples on that. So I wanted to drill a little deeper into these two, top half and the bottom half, and how this metadata can help with that. And so let's look at this. So the top, I've kind of blown it up a little bit. So you have these AI and data pipelines, and you can see there are many of them that could be acting on the data. You may have multiple pipelines. You may be using, you had, okay. Sorry, I thought there was a question. I'm actually, one part of my thing is I'm just trying to see if I can move this out. Okay, thank you. So what happens is that you may be using multiple frameworks. And just to make it a little interesting, I put an ML flow because that's one framework that actually tracks your metadata. And then you have workflow orchestration frameworks like Kubeflow. But really, if you expand this, this is actually a lot more complex, as I think Vishal's presentation kind of alluded to that. And again, this is a very small subset of what's there in this higher layer of data science and data ops platform environments. It's picked this up from Anderson Horowitz reference, so you can actually look at the whole reference there. But really, all this process involves many different steps. There's a data transformation step, there's a model training step, and then there's a model inference step. And on each of these, you have got a lot of different tools. There's data labeling. There's a bunch of different data transformation tools, which actually many of them are not shown here. So you have many more boxes in here. The thing that a lot of people really want to deal with is this ML framework, DL framework, RL libraries, right? So if you are a data science person, that's kind of where you really want to put your focus in. But in order to do that, you need this environment to do distributed processing. You need to be able to track your experiments and do this hyperparameter tuning and get that kind of feedback. And maybe you are using certain features. You want to remember what features are there. So there's a feature store. And then there is all of this in terms of once you do this in production, how do you do the training, then how do you deploy it in production? And you have a model server. Now, what I wanted to really see in this picture, there are many of these, but they are all managing their own metadata, right? The model registry, the feature store, the experiment tracking tools, the data science platforms. What if this thing could be actually exposed to a framework agnostic and storage system agnostic metadata layer? And that's kind of what I mean by this Git for AI metadata, having a Git-like mechanism to do that. And what does that actually involve, right? So why is that useful? So what we mean by this lineage information is you're looking at the transformation. So this is a sentiment analysis example, just and so supposing you have tweets and you are doing some pre-processing of those tweets. Say maybe in this case you want to look at this drug reactions and see what were the side effects that people experience. So you do this parsing of these kinds of tweets. And that could be done with Spark RDDs just to make it interesting. And so that's one stage. And those transformations, you have a lineage DAG, of all of those transformations, connecting the input transformations and the output. Then you have the model, which is actually doing the sentiment analysis. And that, as Vishal was indicating now, that linear data has to be annotated with all of the model ML metrics. So like the hyperparameters, the metrics, how well did it do on this data, what's this data that it was trained on, and so forth. And so you have this tag, you have this information, and this is typically maintained today for reproducibility and for explainability, for understanding things. But this information also allows the data layer to really understand how data is being distilled into insights. So you're now getting to know the connection. You know that this embedding was really generated from this source, and this, and this is how they were connected. You can start to then figure out, based on that, what this data really means. What is the value of the data? How do I really manage and optimize it? For example, the root is kind of the source of truth. You want to preserve it. It doesn't have to be in the fastest tier all the time. If you have something which has got very deep lineage and very high accuracy results, then it signals high value data, right? A model which is probably using that also is likely to be high value data. If you see common substeps, then you know that it's like deja vu feeling. This was done before, and you can do a lot with that. Or you can start to even anticipate which paths really led to higher value, and start to optimize, and you start to actually execute that or recommend those. So that's the one way to fill the missing middle, but a Git-like abstraction, so that it's really very easy to get the metadata, when you get the code for the data. And so when you get the code and the models, and when you have the data anywhere, you should be able to get the metadata with it. So that's the northbound side. So let's look at the southbound side. So and so before that, I just wanted to say a little bit. So when the Git for AI data is really, you're not moving the data anywhere. So let the data be where it is. And one good example of this kind of thing is data version control. There are a variety of open source projects which actually do data version control. There's one called dvc.org, and they have an interesting approach where they would say that we let the versions of the data be in place. So if they're on cloud, if they're on edge, if they're on a data center cluster, the data remains there. But you have pointers to those versions which are stored along with Git. And along with those versions of data, you also manage the lineage of that. So you also have the lineage graphs. That information about the pipelines is managed along with that, with the version data and along with the ML metadata. So if we could, and today it doesn't go as far as saying that you can do a full Git-like approach to do all of that metadata, but imagine if we could do that, then it becomes so much easier. And so this is an example of a really complex pipeline, which was it's an edge to cloud IoT pipeline, and I'm not going to discuss that. But so this was something for an oil refinery, and you can see what it is doing is on the left side is that it's using OT data, operational technology data. It's using IT data. It's doing analytics on the edge, and then it's training those. You have a training bucket on the core or the cloud. And the thing is, if only you could have all of this information really flow all the way across these three different kinds of stacks, then you can really optimize. It's very complex to optimize this whole system. It's complex to figure out what happened, but having something like this would have, this is implemented today, but having something like this would have made it a lot more easier to manage and tune. So let's look at the southbound view. So that's more about understanding the pipelines and things like that. So on the southbound side, we have a lot of different file systems, and there's a notion of a data fabric, which is becoming very common, which will run from edge on-prem to public cloud. And so you have all of those components, and you have streaming, and all of these kinds of data management layers. So what you could do is, once you have the Git for AI metadata, you can really, as I said, maintain versions to the data in this these data fabric, and you have the southbound connectors from this, and that's when you can start to really add the intelligence. You can start to add intelligence. These gear wheels in here, this discerning and prescient are some of the gear wheels. What can you do with that? So let's see one example with autonomous driving. So you have these huge amounts of data coming from the car to the ingestion station, instrumented with ground truth, and that data flows to the data center where it is being used for simulation and for AI models, and you're accumulating huge amounts of this data all the time. how do you make a decision for how to manage that data? How do you know what's really important, what's not? How do you manage that over time? And so one of the things that you could start to do is now if you have this metadata, then it gives you a lot of intelligence. So let's look at the left side of this picture. So you have this data gravity problem, informatics bottleneck problem. Both of those problems, if you really were able to figure out what data is really valuable for AI, and you can start to do that once you really keep observing these AI pipelines. So you can very simplistic hints, the depth of lineage, the metrics, how similar is the data. If data is very similar or data that's leading to very similar outcomes, then maybe they are equally kind of valuable. So maybe you can tear one of them down. So you can use all of those hints to become more discerning in your data pipeline in terms of how you actually store and transfer and move this data. You can, as we showed, you can match the lineage information, match near similar lineage, and reduce computation significantly. So back to that collaborative AI environment, a lot of people doing a lot of computation. You can actually both see what is similar and reduce the computation, or you can start to recommend to people, okay, this is maybe a good way to do this. And prescient is when you're getting new data, you can figure out what's the right analysis to run on it, and you can pull compute close to ingest. You can pre-provision data and resources. So there are a range of different ideas out there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, 5 more minutes. So.
Okay, sure. Okay. So maybe, and so just to give a quick picture of how these can combine together. So let's say you have an analytics cluster and you have this Git for AI metadata tracking this information, and you have all of this information going to that. And then you have an analytics cluster too, on which the data is ingested. Because you have the metadata, you sort of know that these were the computing steps which should be run on this data, and you can just pre-compute them and keep them ready upfront. And this process actually distills the data down also to a smaller set. And so when you run another application, if you run it on application cluster 2, it will find the pre-computed results, great, and it will fast forward that through. But more interesting, if you run that application on an analytics cluster, on a different cluster, what it will see is that it finds that pre-computed data is already there elsewhere, and it will pull that data, but it will pull a lot less data across, and it's going to run that pipeline. So this is how they can kind of complement each other. So similarly, I mean, I'm going to skip the one on similarity in the interest of time, but we can go back to it. But in summary, what really we can do is you can say that if you get this information in the pipelines, you have this central Git for AI metadata, and you can then start to do, and if you have a community effort, and that's kind of my call to action today, is having a community effort, because I see maybe 15, 20 experiment management tools, many different of these frameworks. MLflow tried to unify these things, but we're not really having a unified approach to do this. And if we have a community-based approach to do this, then there's a lot of opportunity for intelligent optimization on both the northbound side and the southbound side. And AI pipelines can become more intelligent and discerning, prescient, and you can actually optimize pipeline data quality as well. So thank you, and I'd like to take questions.
Thank you, Suparna. That was a wonderful talk. I just have one question here. In the interest of time, I just wanted to take a minute to ask about that. So the architecture that you proposed, do you think, like, if we're talking about a very ultra low latency kind of or literally a real-time performance, and especially if it's autonomous agents that have a lot of requirement for processing the sort of an edge AI kind of a use case there, is it going to really add a lot of overheads in terms of really processing the Git kind of a thing from an ingestion side and post-processing that? Because you're really talking about putting a lot of performance penalty on that. What would be your considerations for that?
I think that's a good question. I mean, the discussion also came up earlier, right? You have, I mean, there are two problems. I mean, there is the huge amount of lineage that you could end up with, and then there is also the performance, implications of that. And my answer to that is really that this has to be optimized, right? So, I mean, Git is a mechanism that will let you distribute this information very easily, but you probably not going to, you probably are going to have something on top of this, right? So you might choose a local, you might have a GraphDB, you might have an optimized engine there, right? Which you're going to use for tracking, depending on the environment that you have. And also you would also want to really optimize and track the things that matter. And again, that's what the self-learning foundation can do. So it uses the feedback to even figure out which are the things that are really worth tracking again and again, right? Maybe I don't need to track this again and again, but maybe there is a drift, I need to track it. So there would be all of these things, right? You already have model monitoring tools, you already have these. It's just a matter of getting that information in that kind of a form so that you can then use that elsewhere. So yes, I mean, I agree that there's going to be, in fact, they're going to be, I would imagine that that's what these tools and layers would all build on top of that. And they would have to be customized for different environments, S environment versus an HPC environment versus, a very large scale storage kind of environment.
Well, thanks, Aparna. We have run out of time, but it was lovely talking to you and understanding the thought process behind the missing middle. I hope the mystery is a little more clear to most of the folks on the conference today. And as a token of appreciation, we'd like to, on behalf of IEEE, offer you a virtual memento. Thanks for taking the time and effort and being with us this evening. And we look forward to connecting with you again. Thanks a lot, Aparna.
Thank you very much.
Let's keep moving now. We have the next one, and I'm pleased to invite Dr. Nishant Chandra, who heads the data sciences at Twitter. And Nishant is a PhD in applied machine learning, and he has been working in the last 15 years with a global experience in machine learning, product development, strategy, R&D, and is currently heading the data products at Visa. Tonight, he's going to talk about conceptualization to productization, the life of a data product. So I think it's a very interesting perspective, how the whole journey really happens. We have seen how Vishal talked about some of the considerations there, how Suparna talked about kind of the missing middle in terms of really connecting the AI pipelines with the data storage from the north and the south side of it. And now we are going to see a little bit of, I guess, the temporal journey of how really the conceptualization to the productization really happens there. So without any further ado, I would like to invite Nishant to share his presentation. Nishant, please take it away.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here. Hey, Tathagat, I think the button is still grayed out for me. It would be nice if you can present for me, please.
Okay. Just give me a second.
Sure.
I will just check with Puneet. I don't know.
Here it is. Okay. It's going up.
Great. So are you able to share it now?
Let's see.
Awesome. It's coming now.
Awesome. Hey, everybody, glad to be here. Thank you so much, Tathagat, and thank you IEEE for this fantastic platform. Great to be part of this. I've been, obviously a member of IEEE for many years in multiple geographies. So deja vu for me. From conceptualization to productionization, what I really want to bring together is the idea of ML and then creating a data product out of ML. Before we get started, let's kind of go through some of the funny things we do in our lives. If you have followed me on LinkedIn, or it might have just popped in your LinkedIn, see some point of time, I write something, some funny moments from our serious lives of a data scientist called "You Might Be a Data Scientist If." And one anecdote from there is, you might be a data scientist if you call your spouse your statistically significant other half. So, some fun times from our fantastic life. Let's take you through the state of ML in software product. And I couldn't come up with a better analogy than the analogy of, the sumptuous Italian food. So take a look at pizza, lasagna, and ravioli. The way I look at ML today is one of these three states in various stages of maturity in different organizations. So when I say pizza, what ML has been built on in such products is you have a very strong dough, which is your software, and this dough is topped up with beautiful sumptuous toppings as it is done in a pizza. And this topping is nothing but your ML built on top of an existing software. So this is built as an afterthought. Your models are asynchronous in such cases, and even the outcomes are applied asynchronously. A lot of organizations are building new software stack where intelligence is embedded as part of software engineering. And this is where lasagna comes into picture. You have these layers of software, and then intelligence, which is the core meat that is built inside this, and this is layered intelligence of sort. And then finally, the ravioli approach, right, which is containerized module of intelligence built in, and these modules are independent of each other, but they can be used in mix and match basis, cross-trained together. So hopefully, these kind of analogy brings some creative juices flowing in your brain. So now let's look at some real use case of exactly what happens in a data product, right? So what really happens is what you really want to do is you want to bring a business case, solve it using data science, and then convert it into real-time big data product. And taking a business problem and conceptualizing it as a data science problem in itself is a huge task. From there on, you solve for that the data science problem. You do minimization, you do vectorization, you do all sorts of those things, and then you bring that model into production. So that the last place would be your big data engineering piece. So this is exactly how a data product flows. There may be slight deviations in different places, the way people think, the way leaders think, but pretty much this is the stepping stone of any successful data product. So let me take you through a story of a data product and how this data product has been built. How did we convert a business problem into a data science problem, and then how did we solve for the data science problem, and then finally how did we actually productionize this. So here is a use case which comes from the insurance domain, and in insurance, all companies, what they basically do is they sell insurance policies, right? And these insurance policies basically assess cumulative risk of a group. And based on this risk, they will charge you premium. And the premium is basically the probability that a catastrophe would occur and what would be the cost associated with that catastrophe. So eventually, some of these insurance policies will result into claims. And so, most of those claims will be paid off. In some extreme cases, some of these claims may get into litigation. And, it may be a time when a consumer and the insurance company have to fight it out in a court of law, because obviously the stakes can be very high in certain cases. So this is a use case which we will delve into. We'll take a look at, some problem statements where, insurance policies have gone into litigation, and then how do we bring in to improve the model which predicts the premium. So basically, one of the challenge with doing something like this is you may have this is like a triangular stakeholder approach, right? So you may have a commercial insurance scheme on one side, who are entrusted with the task of creating premium and calculating premium. However, in cases when certain insurance claims get into litigation, then the legal team will come into picture. And this legal team, the moment they come into picture, and for friends in this group who have worked with legal teams, they know that the moment legal team comes into picture, all data belongs to them. So every data which gets into litigation is basically considered as a safe data, and you cannot have access to it except for the lawyers. So this is a conundrum, because ideally the commercial insurance team would have liked to have an access to this data so that they can take this as a feedback. The claims which have gone into litigation, they can take that as a feedback and update their pricing models. However, that is not the case, because legal operations come into picture. And this is where the science team or the data science team, or whatever you call it in different organizations, would come into picture, and with a thought process that, hey, if I can identify PII, personally identifiable information in the litigated data, redact that information away, and provide the remaining non-identifiable information back to the commercial insurance team. In that case, we will be able to make a better use of better use of the data and enable the pricing team to come up with better pricing. So this is the use case which we will work on today. So one team needs the data, other team cannot share the data. And this is where the science team comes into picture to accurately predict which part of data contains privileged information and how to redact it. Except that, the challenge is, at least in this particular use case, the challenge was that, when we asked the lawyers, what is an acceptable percentage where you would say that, percentage of accuracy, where you can say, okay, if you are accurate in predicting the privileged information, you will be able to open that up, to open the remaining data up to the commercial insurance group. And we were sitting down with lawyers and, contemplating, and then somebody came out just with a raw number that, what, anything above 90% accuracy, we should be able to say that, this data is accurate enough. Guess what? And this is where academic machine learning is different from enterprise machine learning. So what happened is, in our case, the data was highly skewed. Only 6% of data was actually positive class. Everything else was negative class. So I can basically pick up any data and say that, this data does not contain PII information, and I will be 94% correct every single time, right? And that is not even building a model. That is just, pure deterministic model. Every single time you will be more than 90% correct. And this basically brought, all the three teams on their knees. And this is where we basically were staring at a blank screen. We had no idea how to proceed. Until one day the sun rose and, the birds were chiming and the clouds were out there, in a beautiful morning when we were having a conversation with the team. And what was this epiphany moment? The epiphany moment was really at the time, it came up from, the solution came up from a broken limb. So how did this happen? As we were basically looking at the data, we realized that lawyers and paralegals have annotated our test data. In some cases, what they have said is that a broken limb is a personally identifiable information, and in some cases they said no, it's so generic that John can have a broken limb. The limb is visible that it's broken. It cannot be identified as a PII. And so this was something which we went into back to the lawyers and asked them, hey, you guys have this discrepancy as you are tagging our training set. Can you explain that? So, these guys said that if 4 out of 5 lawyers agree that this data is PII, then we will call it PII. Otherwise, this data can be shared with the commercial insurance team. And this was the moment. Okay, we said, okay, now what we have is we have a metric to optimize our data science model. And this metric is not accuracy. This metric is recall. What exactly is recall? So recall is when you search, for any phrase on Google, the first 10 search results which you get, if 8 out of those 10 search results are relevant to you, then the recall is 80%. It is exactly the same here that, if 4 out of 5 lawyers agree that, this particular incident is a PII incident, then the recall for that model should be at least 80% or more. So now what we have done is we have converted the business model to an optimization function, and that optimization function in this particular case has to be recall. So now the next question is, how do we build the data science model? So data science model, obviously, a lot of us have looked into it in various ways. You start with tokenization. Tokenization in NLP is nothing but calling every word a token, and this can be called as a bag of words model. For example, if the phrase is the cat sat on the mat, each word, the cat, mat, each word of is a token, and that is a feature into our machine learning model. Somebody can then say, hey, when you are doing tokenization, you are losing the context. So it can be, did the cat sat on the mat or the mat sat on the cat? Because, you have lost the context. So this is where n-grams come into picture, bigram, trigram. So you take 2 words in, to try out the context. At some point of time, you will run out of, you will land into the dimensionality problem, right? So you have to optimize for how many grams you really want. Eventually, for NLP models, it is very important that you build what is called as the word classes. The word class is basically a way to normalize certain content. So, for example, one of the fantastic ways, which is where you have differentiation in data, can be email address. You can have, 15 different email IDs, and each one of them can be called as a different token altogether. Whereas, what you really wanted your model to know is, hey, you know what? In this document, there is email ID which is present. So you will take that email ID and substitute it with something called like underscore email ID underscore. And now you have normalized all email IDs with different values to one token, and that token will tell you whether that email ID is present in the document or not. Just a presence indicator. Augmented data, obviously a lot of times you want to bring external data to augment the differentiation of the model or discriminability of the model, and that is where you use augmented data. Finally, a plan to build the model. And, how exactly will you build the model? You use different kind of data science techniques. You try out a few models. In certain cases, you know exactly, what the attributes of your data is. And in that case, you choose different kind of models. And in our case, we realized that our data obviously was highly skewed, as well as data had a lot of highly sparse vector. This ended up helping us to make a decision to go between support vector machines and random forests. And then finally, feature evaluation, which helps you kind of put different features into stack ranking, and that helps eventually for you to understand whether you are overfitting the model or not. So, obviously this is the journey of building the model. Once you have optimized for your cost function, eventually build the model based on that cost function. And then finally comes the productionization piece, right? So you can, and even in our case, for example, random forest gave better performance on optimizing the recall on the same data. Obviously, because it's a tree-based function, it can do far better in terms of optimization, right? However, the evaluation complexity, meaning when you give new data to random forest to evaluate whether the data is a positive class or a negative class, and at that point of time you would realize that this is not a real-time evaluation. The evaluation complexity for random forest is n log n. Whereas evaluation complexity of SVM is just a linear this thing, which is nothing but a dot products, in summation of all the support vectors, and that helps in doing real-time evaluation. If I have a claim that I immediately have to evaluate, then this is an absolute best choice, and that is why even though in cases where you have made the best model or a better model, but in reality, in productionization, you have to go with a model that suits your use case more than more than it suffices your optimization function. So this brings me to the successful technical decisions, or at least some principles of how a successful technical decision can be taken to productionize a data product. Very quickly, so we will look at something like your entire architecture has to be very modular, so that it can scale over a period of time, because any kind of data product, as we know today, it can come into a need of scaling very quickly. Something can become extremely viral in a short amount of time, and you have to scale up very quickly, and that is where modular architecture is extremely important. And this is again another place where component communication becomes important, because then you have to open up your product for different kind of APIs, maybe reporting APIs, maybe presenting APIs, and whatnot. Flexible topology in terms of shardening the data vertically or horizontally. Simple configuration, meaning having a simple placeholder where you should be able to change various configuration, and the data product runs very efficiently. Model latency, we just talked about that, your choice of model depends upon the use case, not necessarily how best the model has performed on your evaluation data. And finally, and the most important is the kind of team you're working on. Absolutely important to have, your product team, your various stakeholders, your operations team, and obviously the technology team together. So, this brings out to the end of the session. But before I leave you, another one of those fantastic, you might be a data scientist tips. You believe natural language processing is a part of artificial intelligence. So go figure it out. Natural language processing is a field of artificial intelligence. You can, connect me on LinkedIn if you feel like. If there are questions after this Q&A session, feel free to connect me on this email address also.
Thanks, Nishant, for a wonderful session. Of course, I was just chatting with some folks on the IEEE team. I can never forget the pizza and the lasagna and the ravioli metaphor. Now it is like firmly etched in my mind, and it was kind of if I can just have a little funnish, little mean that at the dinner we are almost like evening dinner time, and you were showing us this lovely pictures of the food there. But thanks for such a nice one. So I have one question on this for you, which is you initially talked about how from a business to a data science, and then we eventually carve out a product, sort of a problem, how the problem kind of progresses over that. I think it's a great perspective because a lot of times people think that we are solving in fact, when I talk to startups, they say we are an AI-based startup. It's like, hey, you cannot be an AI-based startup. You have to be solving some problem, and AI might be a tool that you are doing there. Exactly. So I think that upward anchoring of the business problem was, I think, a very well-spoken point there. The one question that I had was, even though you drew a simplistic diagram of just showing the main flows there, I'm sure it must be a fairly iterative process because the model and other things may not be like a single pass process there. Would you like to comment on that?
Absolutely, Tathagat. This model can be extremely complex. What I have built is a very linear model, meaning just one model for the entire data. In reality, what we do is we really build a hierarchical model. So there will be certain features that would work very good with one set of models. You pass those features in through that model, and then you pass another set of features, and then you basically take the outcome of the combined model together. So this is a hierarchical model, algorithmic approach, if I may call it. But to your earlier point, TV, and I consult a lot to startups on various forums, be it NASCOM, be it CII, or even otherwise through VCs. And your point on that, unless you conceptualize the product, the AI today is frankly available on the web, meaning anybody who knows how to do Stack Overflow is basically capable enough to build a model. What you really have to do is you have to bring these small pieces together and create a holistic, solve a holistic problem. And this is exactly the place where some organizations have probably done slightly better than others in terms of identifying the use case and then solving for that use case.
Great. We have one question. I think we have still a couple of minutes, so I would go ahead and ask you, Nishant, on this one. If you can please ask the presenter how the latest frameworks like PyTorch or TensorFlow is better than using the traditional models like SVM or random forest. Sure. Shall we move towards neural nets based frameworks, or the traditional models will continue to hold value in the future?
Absolutely. And I'll bring one another analogy here very quickly. I try to remain on time. When I graduated out of my PhD, one of my mentors asked me one thing, Nish, what is the half-life of your PhD dissertation? And I basically looked at him and I said, Gary, I really think, first of all, I don't know what a half-life is. He said, whatever you have built today will not last a lifetime. It will dissipate. And I'm like, the work I've done is pretty, path-breaking, and it should suffice for a very long time. And as it turns out, the deep learning models came up in another 5-7 years, and that basically changed the entire paradigm of how we look at data science today. So to this question, absolutely, the deep learning models have changed the paradigm primarily because there has been significant improvement in the hardware and the compute power, right? It's not that these algorithms were not present before. It is the way these algorithms were brought together using the compute power to make those changes, right? So it is extremely useful. SVMs are one of the building blocks from this. Use it judiciously, meaning, something which you talked about earlier, TV, is some models, especially in the deep learning domain, are black box models. Use it judiciously, see whether this model suffices your use case or not. If it does, go ahead. I am more than, a bigger proponent of using such models.
Thanks, Nishant. Thanks. And we are almost on time now. It's been wonderful listening to you and talking to you. If I can add one of the, if you are a data scientist, and I just read this long back, and it goes like this. A data scientist is basically a statistician living in San Francisco. Maybe we can say the same thing in Bangalore as well, I guess, but then no harm and no offense intended. Thanks a lot, Nishant. And it was lovely listening to you. And let me just share our thanks and appreciation for all your time and effort taken here, Nishant.
Absolutely.
Talking to you, and we'll be in touch again. Thanks a lot. Okay, with that, we move to the last keynote of the evening, followed by a very interesting panel discussion. And it's my pleasure to invite Ajay Sharma. Ajay is a senior director at Walmart Labs. And before Walmart, he has been in multiple roles at IBM and Yahoo, and also at Intel. He was a program director for analytics products at IBM, and he heads the data platform team at Walmart Global Tech at the moment. Tonight, he's going to speak on ML operations or ML ops for machine learning at scale. So without any further ado, I would like to invite Ajay to share his thoughts.
Yeah, good evening. Hope you can hear me. But I don't see the share button on, so can you do it for me as well?
Yeah, just give a second, Ajay, while we enable that. Puneet?
Yeah, it's enabled.
Okay, thanks, Puneet.
Okay. So yeah, so as you can see from the title itself, I come from a platform background, so I know means I am a data scientist, but I learned some of the things on the way. So don't put hard questions on me on the data science, on neural networks and all that. But I will take you through the whole cycle of ML ops basically. So yeah, any questions? Okay. So if you look sometime back, if I have a notebook and I have access to the data, I'm pretty much ready to write my model and put some software code and even maybe productionize it. So this ML code is actually a very small part of the whole which surrounds it today. So right from data collection to creating a data preparation, then feature extraction, even when you get the data, doing the data verification, data quality checks, taking to or even securing resources for your training, right? From are you doing on laptop or are you going to go on cloud and provision a cluster? worrying about server infrastructure when you deploy and productionize, how will it scale, what will be the throughput, and finally, will your model keep on performing the way it was designed? And can you kind of do something if a model go haywire and take that? So all that is actually very well summarized in a Google paper, Hidden Technical Depth in Machine Learning Systems, which they kind of look at interestingly from the lens of the technical depth. Once this depth got created over the time, as the ML proliferate in the organization, and suddenly at one time, and I have experienced that your model is in production, it is not performing, it is hard to find which pipeline it was created from, and people just keep on searching, they don't find it, and it becomes a huge problem. So what I see is today, what challenges the industry face in general, and even most of the organization is true. There is a lot of work done in various tools and automation, and all of you almost talked about it, that how many tools there are available. But still, most of the organizations are probably have a very fragmented experience. So, for example, we know that the data scientists, and so starting with the data engineers and data scientists pretty much join hands to train the model. So data scientists don't know that much about the data, and data engineers don't know that much about the data science, but those join hands to bring the model and train the model, create a model. Now, when the model is ready, the other crisis happens. That's how to take it to production, because there you need software engineering basically. That is the background you need, and model has to be deployed to maybe as a web service or a microservice. It has to scale to hundreds of thousands of queries per second, and it has to maintain a certain amount of throughput, and that is excellent. It takes a long time to develop because this handover from one to another and explaining that, and primarily being a manual process, long time, right? So it mostly, model takes like months from conceptualization to get into the production. Lack of automation is another serious issue. I already talked about it, and specifically this process being iterative in nature, lack of automation creates a much more overhead in the productionization of almost each step of a machine learning pipeline is kind of iterative. You can go back, you have to redo it and all that. If it's not automated, it is a nightmare. One part is that handling, and we typically see machine learning as handling lots of data. But what about lots of artifacts which the data science creates, right? They create right from the connection parameters to configurations to features to data pipelines to ML models to experimentation, and then metadata and the metadata and more metadata, and this has to be managed. And actually, so I think Sapana talked about the lineage, right, and other speakers too, and that has to be created to kind of see that what path was followed to bring that model into the life. Reliability and trustworthiness of the model is again is becoming bigger and bigger issue because of various even the regulations which are coming, like GDPR on explainability and etc. Auditability and reproducibility is an issue because once like any other good code, it should be reproducible. So you should be able to recreate your pipeline the way it was created. It was kind of in the first go when it was put into production. So these some of the challenges basically rhymes with me very much like DevOps and CI/CD in our old traditional software engineering world, right? But this MLOps is a lot more complex than that because of two reasons. One is it has a component of data embedded very deeply into each of the steps. The secondly, the very iterative nature of it, right? So if I look at the pipeline, it is a normal ML pipeline, right, on the top. So data ingestion, data prep, to do feature engineering, then model training, model experiment, evaluation, deployment, monitoring, and research. And there are feedback loops almost from every step to some step backward, which I have not drawn to kind of reduce the complexity on the slide. but then that is the nature of this problem. So if I look at two distinct problems which I talked about earlier, the development and the productionization of the model. These are two kind of distinct areas and require a little bit different skill sets. But then the challenge is that to have a good seamless pipeline is necessary to reduce time to market. We can't afford to have these handovers and after handover and also introducing issues or problems in between while doing this handover, and we don't want that, right? So still, I have said that taken it two different parts where you go from data ingestion and do model training and experimentation, select a model, which model is ready to be deployed, then you package it, deploy it, start serving, then monitor it, and then possibly retrain as the model fails. But the hop between model training and model deployment is basically transition from CI to CD and continuous integration to continuous deployment, and we'll look at it in the following slides. So I have divided the whole ML in 5 stages: from design, experiment, evaluate, deploy, and monitor. Now we create artifacts and objects in each one of these stages. When I'm in design, I'm creating ML code. I am creating let's start with the data. So data, data has to be version, and the training data which we use we should know that what data we used when the model was trained. So data, the code, the pipeline itself, that is an artifact. If we are creating a multi-stage workflows, those, if we are creating anything in the data prep stage or the feature engineering step, if we have feature repository, then store the feature there so that we know which features were used while the model trained. All that forms at the step of design, which is basically just a storage part. Now, experiment. So any run of the pipeline or multiple runs of the pipeline and hyperparameter tuning creates hundreds of runs of a model, and which can be clubbed in an experiment. And that definition of experiments need to be preserved because we should know that what we did when we selected a particular model. And finally, a selection of the model, a candidate model, which basically generates all the when it is evaluated against the test data set and see that which of the model is best performing. And finally, the chosen model is ready to be deployed. Now, all that parameters or metadata created around the model has to be preserved, and it actually needs to be visualized in a visual way to kind of see that how the performance varied across various experiments or across different models. From there, when the model pipeline is ready, ML pipeline is ready, it has to be deployed and packaged first. So Dockerization is a great way, and the Docker image itself, that has to be stored somewhere in a model in a Docker registry, and finally creating a microservice and deploying it after writing the code which can run into the target environment, and that is version controlled and stored. And then the model goes through its own development cycle, the life cycle in a deployment stage, and finally it is ready for serving or storing. At that time, plug in the monitoring and controls on top of it to see that model is still relevant in terms of various parameters, systems-wise like throughput and performance. The second thing is model performance itself. If it is degrading or model is getting degraded, then that has to be kind of flagged and triggered. And other criteria which are now very prominent, like fairness and all that, right? That has to be seen that either the minority cases is model predicting in a fair way or not, and all that. So that monitoring basically can trigger either a deployment or a retraining, and that again there is a whole this monitoring stage consists of two parts like monitoring as well as retraining, but also A/B testing or blue-green or canary. I mean, all that is part of kind of before selecting the model, which actually serving the in the production, right? So these are the stages. Now let's look at each one of these stages in isolation and a little bit more detail. So CI is all about develop, experiment, and evaluate. And I have kind of Suparna talked about the AI Git. So we don't have an AI Git, but what is there are multiple repositories which needs to be stitched together by a platform, and that basically my group does. So we are doing that so that we can have a trackability and portability across this whole metadata which is stored there. So all the artifacts which are created in the developer stage, which are features or DK rules or fairness rules or training code and all that is stored in a Git. From there, it is kind of taken for experimentation where pipelines run, and the experimentation design is stored with the experiment, and the model final outcome of the model goes to the model repository where it is versioned and also flagged that which model basically is the one chosen for and an evaluation stage, right? So finally, I talked about earlier, so I will not repeat it. So model metrics and evaluated, and all the model metrics are stored. And finally, the chosen model, when we pass all the quality gates and fairness check gates and evaluation criteria, model is selected to be deployed into production. So the main idea over here is that in this CI pipeline, there is a whole rich metadata repository, which is what is version control is very much required for reproducibility, also from the trackability and auditable purpose. So once the model is deployed, it takes to the CD pipeline. So CD pipeline is basically, again, you have model repository that has to be that model now has to be wrapped in a code which can work into the target environment. We do that, build it, and create and all the dependencies for a model are packaged into a Dockerized container, which is again stored, and then finally it is deployed as a microservice into the target environment. Here it goes through the whole cycle of functional testing, and so most of the pipeline that I have seen previously are basically a single pipeline which goes from model training to productionization of model. But here we have three multiple environments one should be able to create, even for the final inferencing API you want to deploy, because you have to do performance testing. You need a test environment for that, or you need throughput, and you have to run multiple tests before the model, the service is actually ready for deploying the production. Finally, deploying the production and plug in the monitoring criteria to that, and then it goes through the monitoring and continuous training lifecycle. So deploy app with the monitoring criteria, there are two. You can see the upper one and the lower one. The upper one is app metrics, which is stored in Prometheus, and basically it is a performance metrics of the model API in terms of throughput or in terms of response rate and all that. And if we see that it does not pass the performance criteria, then model probably something needs to be tweaked into deployment environment, or that has to be done, and model has to be redeployed. So we use actually a deployment environment as Kubernetes, and it is pretty much pretty scalable model. But still, if it is if the model doesn't perform, there is something wrong in there. The lower one is more like model performance, which is checked for model drift. So before going to model drift, right? So we have inference store. So the inferences, the sample is always stored in the inference store, which can be kind of used to measure the model drift. And if model drift or the fairness check fail, then model is actually requires the retraining. So this is the continuous training, monitoring, and continuous training pipeline. So all these three combined makes actually an MLOps end-to-end system. So let's see a reference implementation. So it was all theoretical till now, but this is how. So some of the tools we have selected, they're all open source tools. So GitHub for, of course, the model, the storing all the artifacts like code, etc. We use MLflow for experiments and storing a lot of metadata. Going from there, we use Sheldon for runtime environment and deploying the real-time inferencing. Airflow is more like batch prediction pipeline. And then finally, for the monitoring, we again use Sheldon. And then we monitor the logs as well as the encoded alerts through X matters, which is the pages users, and that whole system makes MLOps pipeline for us, right? So this is a reference implementation. This design, we use Looper and Concord to move the code and actually create a code pipeline over there. Models are stored in the browser storage in Google. So that's the reference implementation which we have. So what we have seen that once implemented, this really kind of helps reduce the issues or the bugs in the system. It enables the easy trackability and traceability of the issues. It also reduces the cycle time to a great extent for that, and all the other things like which comes with it in terms of reproducibility or in terms of traceability, that is also can satisfied. So that's all about this talk. Thank you very much for patiently listening. I have a question.
Thanks, Ajay, for a wonderful perspective here on MLOps. And I think it's only apt that over a period of time, as we have seen with the whole agile way of thinking that permeated into the operations, and then we got into the DevOps, and then we got into the Dev Security Ops, and now we are really talking about MLOps as probably a logical extension of looking into the data downstream there. So the one question that I had there was, does it help particularly in terms of agility of the overall system by untethering the development and the production, or probably, as you said, training and the deployment, like you have untethered them in some sense by building an MLOps model there, and then they are able to, because we are using containers, it's easier to deploy as a microservice, so it makes it a rapidly deployable at scale kind of an architecture. But in terms of an architecture itself, it's not a monolith anymore. You are able to kind of untether these two things. So there is a different cadence of training that's happening, and then there is a different cadence of probably the whole deployment happening. Is that how you look at the solution?
Yeah, correct. But let me answer your first question. Yes, it is an agile development. We can follow the agile development process here because so pretty much we have kind of automated various steps, and it does allow you to incrementally fix the issues and rapidly deploy into the production environment, right? This area is actually very complex, especially when you go to running the multiple hundreds of experiments on a single model, right? So any code change may result, but yeah, so that is something anyway for any coding exercise you have to see the dependencies. But the great thing is that the user doesn't have to do plumbing again and again. It just runs because once done, it takes care of it.
So the deployment platform would also potentially have an A/B testing kind of a capability inbuilt into that.
Correct, and that is basically happens after the deployment. So we have models, and Selden supports it like A/B, Canary, or blue-green kind of testing. Which requires a kind of production data in many of the cases. So it has to be combined in a percentage, like 2% coming from production system and or flowing through a model A and 98% flowing to model B and all that. Yes, we can do that as a deployment.
Okay, thanks a lot, Ajay. That was wonderful. I will just see if we have any questions here from the audience. You can type here, or I think we have one question here from Omera Banu. And she says, which algorithm is suitable to process medical data? I'm not sure if it's specific to anything on medical, but would you like to take it up, Ajay?
Well, so I think I did a good thing that I put a disclaimer in the beginning that I am more a platform guy. I'm not a data scientist. So this question is a guess, would be a guess for me, but I think there are many distinguished people who are here who can answer those.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. I'll just we still have a couple of minutes here, so I will just check in the chat or in the Q&A. I think we got a couple of questions here, so let me just read them out. Ashish has a question. What type of unit cases do you write to test your model? I'm not sure if it's a unit test cases or just unit cases, but what type of unit cases you write to test your model? That's the question here, Ajay.
Right. So So it depends on what kind of test we are writing. We write one test is automatically kind of done against the test data set, right? So it should meet the criteria, and that is kind of done from the very beginning. You do that. So that is I think your question is more about the portal, and so we have so it is any it is equivalent to any other code test. So when we deploy the model and we are moving from dev to production, it is basically testing the microservice itself for the test data set, and then if you are doing performance testing, then run thousands of kind of instances of that and see that and feed the data so that it can scale. So it really depends at this stage we are testing, but those are the things we kind of plug into the test data.
Okay, thanks. And then we have one more question from Krishna MK, which is cloud providers give a lot of AI services. Is it better to consume that directly or to set up AI ops in-house?
Well, there are two different questions, right? So the AI services are on a pre-trained model, right? So you can just get the predictions done or interpretation done just by consuming it. So this one is, I am talking of more about the pipeline where you are basically training the model and putting it into the production. So those are kind of, I would say, different aspects.
Great. Thanks a lot. I think with that, we don't have any questions anymore for you, Ajay. So I would like to take this moment to basically thank on behalf of the IEEE team. And it's been great listening to you. Thanks for your taking the time out and putting your presentation together. And we'll be in touch again. Thanks a lot, Ajay.
Thanks for that. Thank you.
With that, let's keep moving to the last session of tonight's track, and that's a panel discussion. Before the panel discussion, we've been going on for 2 hours. I just want to give a 2-minute comfort break to anyone who would like to just get up, do some breathing, do some stretching, or do some yoga, and come back in 2 minutes while we set up the panel here with our panelists here. So let's just take a 2-minute comfort break and be back again in 2 minutes. Hey, hi, Naganan. Good evening.
Hey, TV, how are you?
Doing good. How about you?
Doing well, doing well.
Let me also check, Rohini, you are on the as a panelist there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. See you in a moment there. And hi, Snehanshu, you are there as well as a panelist?
Yeah. Hi, Tathagat. Hi, Naganan.
Hey, hi. Hi, Rohini. Good, good. How are you?
Hi, Husband. Hi.
Hi, Rohini.
Hi.
So I guess we are literally at 7:59 here, so just a minute to go. I think we'll get started here. So good evening once again. Let's get started with the last event of tonight's track, and that's a power-packed panel discussion here. And I have the honor of hosting moderating this discussion with three very distinguished career professionals there. We have Dr. Rohini Srivatsa. She is the National Technology Officer at Microsoft India. We have Naganand Doraswamy, and Naganand is the founder and managing director of Idea Spring Capital, which is a VC firm. And we have Dr. Snehanshu Saha, who is a faculty. He's a researcher and academic at BITS Pilani Goa campus there. The reason why we chose this particular panel in this format, normally you would see birds of a feather flock together kind of a panel. But one thing that we have tried to do this time is that we want to bring you very diverse and very complementary perspectives. And so in this panel discussion, we are really looking forward to learning from our distinguished panelists, perspectives coming from the field of industry, perspectives coming from the field of startups and deals, and then the perspectives coming from the research and academia world. And together, the theme that's really pulling it all together and bringing it all together is the whole notion of, hey, what are really the advances in AI? So let me go ahead and introduce my panelists here one by one. And I would probably start with the leading question once I start with their introduction, so that they can talk about some of their current things. To get started, Naganand is, as I said, founder of Idea Spring Capital, which is an early stage venture fund in technology and products. By way of qualification, he is also a techie in his previous life. He has done his master's in computer science from Virginia Tech. Long back, I don't want to tell when he did that. Naganan, that will tell your age. To tell that. But some of his prominent investments of his firm have been in Bugle, which is in customer insights, has been in ConvertCart, which is in conversion optimization. Some of you might have heard of, there's a lot of focus on the whole electric mobility. He also has an investment in Numosity, which is in the intelligent middleware for that. They have diverse interest in cloud backup, Nimesa, and in packaging artwork, Karomi, and other ones like that. So let's get warmed up a little bit on that one, Nagan, and then I would like to really get your introductory question going as what's keeping you busy these days? What is the current and interesting work that you are on at this point in time?
So TV, I've been watching your session for the past couple of hours, and it's really sad that I'm away from technology. You know, I used to understand many of the things that were being discussed today, but what keeps me busy is now only talking to entrepreneurs and living your life through their life, right? So you're not directly involved in any technology, but you're only indirectly involved in all the technology. But however, having said that, the good news is there's no dearth for great entrepreneurs in India now. I think past decade has been excellent for Indian startup ecosystem. But I'm a B2B guy, and I don't understand B2C much at all. I just focus on early stage products, companies or startups that are focused on products, right? Selling to enterprises or B2B2C. And what we've seen in the last 5 years is an explosion of entrepreneurs in that space across multiple different segments. And multiple different technology, multiple different sectors and industries are supporting. And building products not only for India but for the world, right? So I think there's a significant change, and that is keeping all the VCs busy. And the other change that has happened in the past year particularly is even the large VCs in India now are moving away. I shouldn't say moving away, are very interested in B2B as well. So initially, getting the follow-on routes for B2B used to be very hard, but they have moved away quite a bit now. And, we're seeing a significant traction in B2B. So that's keeping me busy. We kind of, in talking to entrepreneurs, it's across all segments. Like 3 years ago, since this is a panel on AI, I'll just give an anecdote. 2 or 3 years ago, anybody who used to come to present to us used to have 3 words in them. AI/machine learning, big data, and blockchain. So we started getting tired of it, saying, do you really understand what you're talking about? But fortunately, these days when we get the pitches, I think people, all the entrepreneurs have matured a lot more. And, they don't really talk AI as an AI, but they talk AI in terms of the solution they're bringing to the market, the technology they are building to market problems and so on and so forth. I think there's a significant maturity that you see in the entrepreneurs today in terms of pitch, what they say, and then focus more on the problem they are solving. Because I have invested in 16 companies so far, and out of that, 8 of them have some form of machine learning or artificial intelligence, some form of it, providing a technology solution. There are three ways, right? One is voice, one is video/images, and one is text. I think one in the voice space, they're building voice technology for understanding Indian languages. And there's a couple in the video analytics space, and the others are all in the data space, like the one you mentioned in Google. And the other 8 are addressing products in the enterprise space. So all I'm trying to say is there are some that we are with AI and some without AI, like most of the infrastructure companies like have Level Networks and Nimesa that you talked about. They really don't have any big need for AI. All the other companies, like whether it's consumer insights or productivity improvement, like what we have in Nudges in Volkswagen, all of in some form of AI. So I think it's a pretty good balance between AI and non-AI products that exist out there in the industry. So overall, that's what is keeping me busy. It's a great time for startups in India, and very excited to be part of that now.
So just a short follow-up question on that, Naganan. What I hear you saying is that end of the day, we are talking about, hey, it has to be a better mousetrap. I don't really care if it's a gold-plated mousetrap or a wooden mousetrap. So AI to me could be an enabler and could be a very interesting proposition there. But if you tell me that you say I'm building an AI startup, that by itself doesn't cut any ice for me.
Absolutely. Unless and until you're building a platform for AI, and there are very few companies in India that are capable of building a TensorFlow or equivalent AI platform. If you start doing that, yes, you talk about it because you're building a platform, and that's a huge differentiator. But, we have more applications of AI and some neural networks being built as opposed to a platform being built, because I think for that, probably Snehanshu can comment on it. Those things need to start in the campuses, or Rohini can talk about it as to what they do in Microsoft. I think those are the places where you will have the genesis for these kinds of platforms. But we have not seen that in the market yet as of today.
We'll come back to you, Naganan, once again. So let me introduce our second panelist, Dr. Rohini Srivatsa, and she has done a PhD in computer science, in computer engineering from UT Austin. Again, I'll not tell the year here. And in addition to that, she also has the business acumen in terms of she went to the Wharton and earned her MBA in finance and general management. So that makes her a very interesting perspective of seeing from a researcher and a techie perspective, and also looking at it from a manager's perspective there. Prior to that, she has been at IBM, and she has been the CTO of Janalakshmi Financial Services. She was a VP of Analytics at Fidelity Investment, and she also has been a consultant at BCG and at Bell Labs for 5 years, and to Capital probably has also been an educator in SME for AI at the MIT Sloan Exec Education. So quite an achievement with more than 20 plus technical publications in ACM, IEEE and other journals. Rohini, my first question at this point then is, like, you come with a wealth of knowledge and practical experiences. So what's keeping you busy these days?
Thank you, first of all, for that introduction. That definitely puts some years behind me, but it's a very, very, I would say, very exciting time to be in the technology industry, because we've all noticed in the last 8 months that the level of digitization in every sector of the economy has really taken off for various reasons, right? Our virtual way of working. Here we are having this conference in this fashion. So my role overall is about working on strategic topics on technology, what is in the frontier, and with customers and partners and the government at a pretty, I would say, country level, national level scale. So, where we are engaging in transformation at a large scale. And then I think to the question that you were in the introduction, right? As part of my career has been deep in R&D, and I was very much of a techie and an R&D person early part of my career, publishing papers and all of that. And then I've spent time in business. So my ability to think strategically and where impact is going to be from technology at scale is what keeps me busy. I think over the last 6 months, from how we have seen the industry evolve in India, every organization is looking at what does their business look like. They've gone through the immediate response to the pandemic, and then have gone through the pains or going through the pains of rebounding. But really, they're questioning what does it look like going forward. They're reimagining their business, right? So it's the respond, rebound, and reimagine, and they're reimagining as to how data, how their business digital will change their business and across the spectrum. And so I think a lot of my time is being spent today on helping our customers, partners think about their business. And of course, I work quite a bit with the government in some of the large initiatives that the government is moving forward in the digital era. I'll pause with that to get more questions later on.
So thanks, Rohini. And I'm tempted to ask a question as a follow-up. Like when I talked to Naganand, I had a question around funding, like a better mousetrap there. Now we are talking about you being the other side of the table, where you are advising various partners or even potentially government, for example, in terms of adopting AI as a solution there. So what would be so if I, for example, say that, hey, one way is if there's a gold rush on and everyone is going to dig for the gold, better make shovels, right? So maybe that's one business model there. But the other business model might be as a consumer, what is a sort of I like to call it as a cognitive advantage as opposed to a mechanical advantage. So what would be my cost benefit analysis, or what would be my consideration to look at AI as a potential solution enabler in order to kind of look at that? Are there any broad swaths of pattern that you are seeing in Indian consumers?
So look, I think to me, AI is I think of AI as a really catch-all. Having spent my big part of my career, I mean, I got into neural networks way back in the early 90s when it was really an R&D thing to do, right? So I think I've seen a little bit of a journey here, and I think the way to think about AI as a terminology is all about getting value from data. How do you unlock value from data? And when you think of it that way, then one needs to go down to a perspective of understanding from every customer perspective, where are they in their data journey? So I don't think of AI as being a panacea to solve every problem. I think it's about finding where a particular customer is on their data maturity journey, and what will it take, what tools and technologies will require for them to unlock that value that is relevant for them in their business. Right. And if you look at the recent the NASSCOM report that was launched about unlocking value from data, a lot of that was about half a $500 billion that the country can unlock, was all about unlocking value from the data across different sectors and different functions, and what the government needs to do in terms of really moving along that path. So it's, at one end there are cognitive services, and what Nagaran was talking about, startups using cognitive services to make their products more intelligent, and Microsoft does that, right? Most of our Dynamics and our workplace tools are getting more and more AI enabled. There's more and more AI which is becoming actually in the background. You don't even know you're using AI, but you're using AI, right? So it is going to be in that way. It's going to become what is called ambient intelligence. It's not just, it's not artificial intelligence. It's going to be ambient intelligence. And so it's going to be part of it. But at the end of the day, you have to remember where you are unlocking that.
Thanks, Rohini. And we'll come back to you. And let me introduce our third panelist here, Dr. Snehanshu Saha. He did his PhD in mathematical sciences from UT Arlington, and he has been an academic both in the US and currently is an academic at BITS Goa campus before spending about 8 years at PES here in Bangalore. And his areas are very interesting in terms of machine learning and predictive analytics and computer modeling in astronomy. And that was something which really piqued my interest. He talks of something which I didn't really understand, which is scientometrics. So I would love to pick his brains on what is scientometrics really. But what I really found very intriguing, Snehanshu, in your profile was that you are actually somebody who is using the AI to kind of literally go out of this world, and you are using it for classification of exoplanets and nova and separation of stars and galaxies and quasars. I mean, that's awesome. That it doesn't get any more literally cosmic than this. So Snehanshu, with that little brief prelude, if you can help unravel the mystery of what are some of the things that you are doing, it sounds like a rocket science sort of a thing there.
Well, I'm flattered, Tathagat, that you consider me a rocket scientist. So I sometimes make jokes about myself, in that particular context, but it's lovely to be here. Actually, it's sort of intriguing to me as well, in the sense that when I started this journey about 6-7 years ago, because before that I was doing computational modeling always. I mean, my training was in computational modeling, and that's exactly what I was doing. I never thought that I would get into machine learning. But when I did get into machine learning, fortunately, I interacted with some of the very bright minds in Bangalore. I mean, in a way, Bangalore is probably, on both sides, academia and industry, is probably the best city to live in. Because, I mean, you have IISc on one side, and then you have Microsoft and Google and Facebook and all those guys, right? So I had come across with them, and they presented some very intriguing problems to me, in the sense that they said that, look, I mean, we are sitting on tons of data, and we really don't know what to do with it. We know how to make sense of it, but because of the sheer volume of the data, it is no longer feasible for us to, look at each and every sample in the data set that we have and try to figure out from a pure astronomy point of view. So can you help us? So that was the beginning. And then I also realized while doing that kind of research with them, because Indian Institute of Astrophysics and Raman Research Institute, they have very high performance cluster computing environments. Right? I realized that a lot of the institutions in India, even the ones funded by the government, do not have the luxury of having such high input cost computing equipment. So it led me to think, I mean, can I design methods and algorithms in neural networks and deep learning, which are, friendly to input cost, and which does not require a lot of money, right, to set up, and also your outcome from whatever you are doing on those low compute, low power systems, in the sense that the goal was, can you train a deep learning library? Can you build a deep learning library on a mobile device? Right? I mean, currently, most of the things that are done on a mobile device are not computed on the device, that's cloud backup, right? So all of that, I mean, even though I work a lot with the astronomers, my primary area of interest is acceleration of deep learning techniques towards really fast convergence. And in that particular context, what I typically look at, how much carbon footprint is my algorithm spitting at? So I want to reduce the carbon footprint of my method. I want to reduce the number of epochs or iterations to converge to an algorithm. And so therefore, there is a lot of mathematics involved in my research, which sort of looks at the theoretical implications of doing so. Okay. And it has worked to my advantage that when I started doing research in deep learning, the mathematical side and the computational side of deep learning was not very well studied. It is still not. I mean, let me add, right? We are still learning, right? But that was the amalgamation. So even though you tie me up with a rocket science kind of a thing, I'm still very much, an ordinary individual living on Earth, and I'm trying to understand. I have helped explain some of the phenomena in terms of the exoplanetary objects and stars, quasars, and galaxies. Okay, and there are very interesting explainability problems that have arisen out of those, which I have used in some other areas in industrial system. Like, for example, you have an event log, right, in a bed scanner, right? And can you explain some faulty logs? Can you explain some anomalies and things like that? So it has sort of come a full circle for me, but I'm not there yet. I mean, I don't think anybody is. And I'm really looking forward to listening to both Naganand and Rohini regarding their perspectives about this. Okay, but I mean, even though I'm an academic, I don't treat industry as something that I treat industry as a partner which can provide us really valuable feedback and realistic expectations from machine learning. Because when we do some academic work, we always go for the state of the art thing, right? And in most real life situations, the state of the art doesn't work.
Fair enough.
So,
yeah.
And
So no, thanks for such a wonderful perspective on that, Snehanshu. So one question, it's so intriguing. Still, I cannot get it out of my head that from deep space to deep learning is a very wonderful kind of a metaphor that I can think of. So one question, when Rohini talked about the NASSCOM study where 500 billion of data value can be unlocked. So much of data is available. On the other hand, you are dealing with a situation, you are already trying to look into a very rarefied domain where there is a data, but we don't quite know, and it's not something that may be immediately put to use. So for example, and I'm just trying to understand, is it more like a visual intelligence, or are you looking at the electromagnetic signals to really do the classifier, or are there some other things? And what might be the transfer of learning into things which we are able to see? Because a lot of those, probably finding an exoplanet or a star is like literally finding a needle in a cosmic haystack. So you are dealing with a orders of magnitude complexity, which might be compared to that, solving a real world problem might be a cakewalk. So how does some of those perspectives sort of pan out there?
It's not exactly a cakewalk, but I'll say this. Like, for example, if you look at art where we are living, right, it's also a needle in a haystack, because it's like 4,000, there are about 4,800 plus discovered exoplanets, right? Most of them outside our solar system and a few inside the solar system. And Earth is just one such instance which happened to be habitable. Okay, all right. So to answer your first question, most of the data that we work on are signal data. So there isn't much of visual data that is available. Even with very sophisticated, NASA missions, and in recent times, some very, landmark space missions by the Chinese Academy of Sciences, right? So therefore, the data is the signal data. And one of the reasons, why do you think NASA invests so much in exoplanet research? The reason why it invests so much is that there are already, you wouldn't believe, and in fact, I myself couldn't believe my eyes when I stumbled upon some of the documents that NASA prepared, and those are like colonization models on exoplanets. So they have already figured out how much money they are going to make once they discover another exoplanet which is, sort of habitable, right? And the part that is difficult in the exoplanetary machine learning is that machine learning is just one part of it, and the inferences that you draw from your machine learning algorithms have to be strongly validated by your physics domain knowledge, right? So it's not like you design a system and that's it. Okay, and in fact, in most of the more artsy things that we worry about, like for example, healthcare, it's also pretty much like that, isn't it? Like, for example, if you try trying to design a predictive healthcare system, my own experience is that most of the time the doctors don't agree. Okay, and there are strong reasons why they don't agree, because there are label noises that data samples jump between, and those are regions of confusion for which you actually require clinical intervention. Your ML algorithms cannot do that, right? So it's much better. So the lesson that I learned, and astronomers actually helped me learn this lesson very, very well, is that there is a reach between your pluses and minuses, right? There is a region that you should leave it to the experts. So it's better not to predict than predicting it wrong and claiming it as a card. Okay, so what we are doing right now is that we are devising some metrics for prediction confidence, which we are going to use across the board. So if we are not confident enough, we will say that we are not going to predict this sample. So we will leave it to the expert, right? And there, some amount of transfer, in the sense, some amount of active learning comes into place, where the expert comes in and says, look, I think this is the level of this data.
Okay, fair enough.
So, yeah.
If I may jump in
Sure.
there,
Sure.
I'm looking at the examples that Snehanshu is talking about. And many areas which are maybe closer to our planet come into mind, which could be similar large data problems. One of them we are dealing with is the pandemic, finding the right solution for it. There are many others like biodiversity issues, climate change issues. Many of these are very large scale systems problems and big data problems that if we could solve maybe with what Snehanshu is doing with exoplanet search, I think we might have a pretty big impact on this planet.
Yeah, actually, to answer your question, Rohini, we have. In fact, there is a very large gene expression data set that Harvard guys curated, right? And as I said initially, that my focus is always to be able to run algorithms on a low compute, low power machine. So what we have shown is that we can reproduce the same results reported by the Harvard guys by dropping up one hidden layer of 9,000 neurons altogether. And what it does is that it reduces your carbon footprint by 17%. And that's a lot. Okay, so these are some of the questions that I continuously dabble in, because I think because we live in India, particularly Indian academia, right? I mean, the input cost to research has to be really, I mean, it cannot go up in our face, right? I mean, we cannot afford Harvard-like infrastructure where we have a very large titanium GPU system, like worth millions of dollars. And then, that's simply not feasible, okay? And in the process of doing so, you actually end up doing some fundamental work.
Okay. Thanks, we'll come back to you again. Let me change the gears a little bit and go to Naganan. One of the questions that I'm always interested to see, because in India we seem to have this whole the economics of technology adoption or the economics of technology introduction are always tilted in the favor of cheaper labor. And hence we tend to still, even though there might be, today morning we had actually one of the panelists, he shared a very interesting Milton Friedman anecdote where apparently when Milton Friedman saw at the side of the road, people were basically digging holes using shovels, and he asked them, why are they doing that? Why don't they use the latest technology? And he said, well, we have to give them employment. And he said, in that case, why don't you give them spoons? Why only shovels, right? So now, so clearly that's a very fit case for how we have seen the manual versus the machine, or now the manual versus the cognitive sort of a thing there. What are the roadblocks, or what are the big challenges that you see in kind of AI adoption in India, where you are seeing that there is a lot of reluctance among the adopters? The market is simply not kind enough because of the economics of that.
Yeah, I think in India, even before you get to AI, I think the question becomes technology adoption, right? So, let's not even get as far as AI. And there are many reasons where even technological adoption is very slow. Even if you look at our corporates using a lot of enterprise software and buying from enterprises, we are still at 3 or 4 billion or 7 billion market, including everything. Whereas, that's peanuts when compared to the rest of the world. And similarly, when you look at agriculture, even though we are bringing all the latest and the greatest capabilities in agriculture in terms of IoT, in terms of drones and so on and so forth, adoption is still a challenge because of the fact that it's an extremely fragmented market. Right, 81% of in the Indian agri market is owned by farmers who have less than 1 or 2 acres. Right, the statistics are mind-boggling in terms of how much land is owned by farmers who can use the technology effectively. Because any technology solution has, it is an ROI, and it's very hard for you to sell until there is a certain mass, right? To say, all right, why don't you guys use this technology? I think that's the fundamental challenge you have in India with respect to technology adoption. Now, AI and use of AI and other things comes next, right? Because if you don't have the technology, obviously you don't have data, and if you don't have data, then obviously you cannot build a solution that is meaningful. So that is why you have seen all these impediments to AI being deployed, because technology itself has not been deployed. Now, is that is it stuck? No, it's not stuck. It's changing quite fast. Right now, if you look at UPI, you have tremendous access to data so now you can build a lot of intelligence around financial products. Now next is coming the health stack. Once the health stack comes in, once you start collecting hospitals, from labs and other things, then again you start seeing that. So past, no, once UPI started, you saw a serious amount of work in startups, right? That Paytm, Pay, a whole bunch of startups that came out of that space because you suddenly enabled technology. Similarly, seeing those coming in agriculture and in health space. Now that enterprises are now starting to deploy. Now you must have seen all the activities that are happening in Khata Book and activities that are happening in Dukan and other companies, right? You will start seeing SMEs adopting data. And once you start seeing SMEs adopt technology, you will get a lot of. So the inherent roadblock for advancing AI in India has been a lack of data. And so we are solving that problem now. And once you solve that problem, then I think you can ask the question of AI, right? So we are still one step behind, and that's the reason we see that happen.
Okay, no, that's very interesting that you say lack of data, and I think it's very kind of if I put a hindsight lens on that, then it's very clear that we have health systems is totally fragmented and decentralized. So there's no way we can ever get to the whole data. I think until the UPI happened, even the payment was now with the UPI and the stack, maybe there is a more homogeneous data flowing across the systems. Correct. So now it is possible for us to build. Maybe it is an equivalent of the open data like in UK kind of a thing there, because it allows us to now look at the transactions better.
Correct. You must have watched OCEN, right? OCE, and Open Credit Enabled Network. Now that is tying in with the GSTN network of India, right? So if you can see, there's a pattern here. You start UPI, you started GSTN. Now suddenly the amount of data you have to collect to make decisions and to predict it is changed significantly, right? So I think that's why I'm saying you will see many interesting solutions being built going forward, because now we seem to be having access to data. And the same thing even with government. Every state is now trying to figure out, we have data, but how do we put the data out for public consumption, public usage, so solutions can be built on top of it. And they are figuring it out. And even in Karnataka government, if you look at it, they have the IIT Bangalore, and they have a center for that. But the government currently is looking at how do we build a data lab where all the government data can be shared. Now, once you have that, you can build very, very interesting solutions, and that's what
are we looking at a parallel of like data.gov in the US, which has like 200,000 data sets available. I mean, it's stuff like where are the fire hydrants in the whole of US, and anyone can go and build something on top of it. We are going to see this kind of an initiative from Karnataka government, is what you are saying?
Yes, absolutely. We are on that path. We have a startup vision group that's now saying, let's go and make sure that people with democratize access to these kinds of data, so people can then build solutions. And then you can do hackathons and other things to encourage entrepreneurs or companies to build solutions on top of it, right? So I'm sure Microsoft and other people are already working on these kinds of solutions, and having access to data will push the technology faster, and so is the research. I think we can do a lot more research, and once we have data, and to Snehash's point, how do we create frugal innovation? Not spend huge amounts of money, but focus on frugal innovation to push into the new frontiers in these areas.
So let me take that point, Naganan, to Rohini, and really understand from a enterprise perspective. Does she see the same challenges like availability of data for big enterprises as really the impediment to adoption of AI-based solutions, or there are other factors there which have an impact on the adoption rates there? Rohini, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. So one, I'd like to just build on what Naganan said on the data ecosystems, right? I think given the country's really very, very vibrant both startup ecosystem and the developer ecosystem, I think that's a very important path to take. But to answer your question about if I look at the large enterprises, if I kind of take that separate cut, right, of large enterprises, really enterprises are themselves going through their own data maturity journey, if you will, right? Because they've had perhaps siloed data, the data quality, data governance, pipelines, all of those are in different stages of maturity. So therefore, if I go back to my earlier point about really looking at AI as a way to unlock the value from data, I think the question that becomes is, if an organization is at a place where their data maturity is high, Then you are looking at potentially using some cognitive services and really creating AI at scale, factory automation, things like predictive maintenance, some of those where you have a data pipeline to actually bring decisions and that can be implemented and impact at scale. I think what organizations who are really serious about this data journey and the thinking around unlocking value from their data, they are also realizing that in fact, AI is less about technology than it is about very clear strategic mindset. And therefore, a leader should buy in to say that, this is clearly the future of my organization. And therefore, we will both build capacity and skilling and the sort of the mind share to experiment and scale. The strategic mindset, the second aspect becomes that of culture. Because see, at the end of the day, a data-driven organization has to inherently function differently. It has to inherently be open to new ways of thinking about how they make decisions. Who gets to call the shots based, either is it a gut-based decision, or are you actually going to look at data and challenge your mindset? Right. So, culturally, a lot has to change in an organization when you start to become a data-driven organization. And finally, a lot of organizations again who are thinking at scale are really having to think that there are hidden biases, there are hidden issues inside the interpretability point that came out earlier, right? So the idea of responsibility and ethics of AI has to be thought about ahead of time. So in fact, when we talk about really enterprise AI at scale, it has to be about technology, but even more importantly, it has to be about strategic thinking, culture, and responsibility. Really say that you are in this, and this really is serious business for you, and not experimentation in silos.
Fair enough. Thanks, Rohini. I want to carry this question to Snehanshu with a little spin here in terms of the hard problems in terms of research, like how are we solving. So Snehanshu, I was very intrigued. A couple of days back, I saw that video and there was this match going on, a football match. And the AI-enabled camera that was scanning it was actually looking at the bald head of the referee, and the camera thought that was the ball actually, and it just kept tracking it very innocuously. Now that's a very innocuous and a very kind of a funny sort of a thing there, with no offense to anyone who has a bald head there. But the point I'm making is that there are still a lot of problems that seem to be so intuitive to a 3-year-old or a 7-year-old, which are still kind of beyond the cognitive abilities of our state-of-the-art AI. What would be your thought about this, Snehanshu, in terms of what are the hardest problems? Because when we are talking about advances in AI, what are it that you are expecting in the immediate or 5 years or 10 years as the hardest problem that the research world is going to focus on?
Right. I mean, I'm glad, Tathagat, you asked that. In fact, I was expecting that the question will come, but by now I think probably half of the planet has seen that video, right? And I mean, I'll just give you another example. In fact, this was a conversational chatbot with one of the airlines, domestic airlines, right? And a student of mine posted this some time back. I mean, probably just to annoy me or whatever. But anyway, so what he was like, he was traveling to Hyderabad or somewhere, right? Okay. So what the airlines had done was that they sent his luggage to Calcutta. Okay. So when he tries to complain to customer care, which is a chatbot, I mean, it's a bot sitting at the other end of the machine. So he sort of writes a sarcastic message saying that, thanks for, safely transporting me to Hyderabad while, sending my luggage to Calcutta. And then the chatbot responds in a typical conversational manner saying that, I'm really glad that you liked your service. And then he responds saying, really? I mean, this is one of the other things. So one of the two things that come into mind is that when you are, particularly the hardest problems in AI are in the computer vision space. And I know this because I am, for the last 6-7 months, involved deeply with an AI startup in Bangalore. And there we are actually looking at solving some of those very complex problems. And what you just pointed out is sort of an anomaly. Okay. And one of the reasons that could have happened is because that all due respect to the referee, I mean, probably his bald head, the geometric curvature property of his bald head closely resembles to a football, which is why the algorithm got it wrong, right? And also perhaps he was moving really as fast as the ball itself. Right. I mean, if sometimes referees have very good peripheral vision and they really don't need to move up and down the field, right? But sometimes, there are some referees, I mean, don't be mistaken by a bald head. That guy may be just 40, right? Or maybe even younger. So those are some of the things, like, because at the end of the day, your inference algorithms are feature driven, right? So the problems, one of the key problems is that, I mean, People say that if you apply a deep learning network, then the deep learning network helps you to learn new features. That's actually a load of crap. Let me tell you with all due respect, right? Even if your network or algorithm learns new features, those features itself are thrown in a black box at you. And this is the problem in AI, because previously in the good old days of machine learning, maybe Rohini knows this much better than I do, right? When she was in the early 90s doing machine learning, right? Or maybe even before that kind of machine learning was more classical, because you did not have the challenge of dealing with a large pool of data, right? And there it was the interpretability, much of the interpretability was actually built in those methods, which the advanced computer vision DPI algorithms are not able to, which is why, if you recall, some time back I made the statement that when you are not confident enough to predict, don't predict at all. And there you bring in some active learning perspective, which is nothing but an expert opinion.
No, I think that
right?
makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Right.
So I think, I mean, in the interest of time, I just want to open it up for a Q&A from our participants as well. And see if we have any questions that they would like to ask any of the panelists here. You can type it in the chat or in the Q&A. And if you would like to ask it to any specific panelist, you may please indicate that. If you would like it to be a generic question, you can leave it there. So please do type in there so that we can use the next about 15 minutes for the Q&A with the panelists. I do have one question to you, and it is to address to you, Snehanshu. What hyperparameter tuning principles you follow on reducing model sizes for efficient training? In other words, given a problem, for example, astrophysics, how do you know what hyperparameters to choose?
I'll pick up a short response to that question. Well, that's the crux of my research. I actually do not tune hyperparameters at all. Okay, I mean, in fact, one of the important sub-parts of the question is I think it's from Neeraj. He's asking that, how do you reduce the model size? That is very, very important. I mean, that sort of solves a lot of issues related to the input cost of research. I think the biggest problem in artificial intelligence research, modern artificial intelligence research these days, it's heavily driven by architectures. Now, I think Naganand was talking about TensorFlow. I have nothing against TensorFlow. Okay, but the problem is, I mean, these are built on some architectures that, some of the frontline researchers thought that was the way to go. So the problem with deep learning research is that it started with heuristics. It started with a lot of heuristics, meaning your opinion, my opinion. Okay, and not hard science. And they built a bunch of architectures which work well for a set of problems, but do not work well for another set of problems. And the young guys, when they start out their careers, and because of the lack of perspective and the background training, their reference material are those, right? Okay. So, and that is where most of the problems lie. So in order to answer directly your question, Neeraj, is that there is one thing that we are doing, which is pretty much reducing the depth of a neural network. Okay, and we can do so by over-parameterizing the neural network. I mean, you could write an email to me and I will be able to help you explain that network and that method in detail. But briefly speaking, the way we are approaching that problem is that we are seeking neural network activations, because you know that we use activations in neural networks. We interpret those activations and solutions to differential equations, and therefore use the power of the solvability of differential equations to efficiently reduce the size of those neural networks. So that is sort of a technical intervention to a problem, an architecture problem. All right. And another, I think I have the other question. What I wanted to do tell you is that, for example, let's say, I mean, in a deep learning network, people say that there has to be a learning rate. It is a hyperparameter. Okay, and people choose some value of the learning rate, thinking that okay, this makes sense to us, like common sense. Nothing more than that, just common sense. So what happens is that if you apply this common sense, you actually end up going back and forth between a bunch of iterations. See, it's almost like an informed guess. So it's not even computer science, right? So instead, if you figure out something more robust, okay, which is what me and a lot of other people in the Western world are doing, is that they are not tuning these hyperparameters anymore. They're trying to figure out some approximately correct values of the hyperparameter based on optimization principles. So I think the key to solving most of the issues in neural network driven AI research is to develop a theory of optimization, which is still not mature, I would say, in 2020. Hopefully in another 5 years it will mature. And that would solve a lot of our back-end problems. And then there are other problems as well, based on the domain that we are specifically solving. Like healthcare remains a very, very critical, issue where a lot of the solutions that we develop may not be still up to it.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think we'll keep going. I have one question here from Jesse that I would like to point to Naganan, which is, and others are free to chime in as well, which is, please suggest data sources for doing research work on electric vehicles and AI deployment for that. I guess it is coming from your conversation about Numosity, I guess. So Naganan, would you like to respond to that?
So this is work happening in India. If it is work happening in India, I think most of the electric vehicle work that is happening is all, it's mostly assembly. Because we're not really, developing. There's very few companies doing actual train and other capabilities. So that is so. Hence, I would say not a deep amount of work happening from a mechanical and electrical engineering side, and also from autonomous driving. Ati Motors in IISc is one startup that comes to mind that is doing good work in this space. But that I've not seen a whole lot of startups trying to solve the autonomous driving issue, whether it is leader-based or radar-based. I've not seen a whole bunch of startups in India addressing the autonomous driving also. So I think from electrical vehicles, we're still behind, and there's not a whole lot of things to talk about. However, what we're seeing is once we have the vehicles now, how do you make them operational? And there's a lot of work going on in that space.
Thanks, Naganan. I want to ask one question to Rohini, which has come from Krishna, which is, what are the major strategic AI initiatives in India at present? Rohini, if you would like to answer that one.
Sure. So look, I think the discussion that you're having earlier about use of AI for unlocking value from data, right? I think a lot is going on across industries. But if I go with some areas to catch attention, even during, for example, the COVID response time, there was work that, in fact, we were doing with the Karnataka government on prediction of where lockdown may be required, where and it may not be very, very advanced prediction models, but still being able to predict where hospital beds could be a challenge, where lockdown could be required. So I think in some respects that use of data for decision making is starting to become important. Now, places where sort of AI from a corporate services perspective is clearly, we discussed the idea that in the financial services world, we're seeing a lot of fintech companies, right, which are really data driven and which are looking at either credit rating or customer experience applications where AI is. And now, if you go down a different place where AI can, and we are seeing that as place where the inclusion of technology comes into play. It's on a lot of voice-enabled, interfaces. A lot of in Indian languages, ability to offer services to people in different Indian languages, And there, it's a question of accessibility. It's just a question of, really spreading that digital divide, if you will, right? If you can offer government services in different languages that don't require you to have to type, that's a very, very profound use of AI in terms of just having, basic government services available. So I think it's a range. From cognitive really cognitive services for just better interfaces, accessibility, inclusion, to really enterprise use of AI for unlocking value from data. So it's a very big range, and clearly each organization is in a different place in that cycle.
Thanks. There is one question from Rajeshwari, which is, I'm not sure any of you would like to really go out on a limb and do a prediction. That is what I think is written. But what is the prediction that AI can help agriculture or farmer sustainability in India? Maybe I would even read that as, what are the opportunities that AI can help agriculture, farmer sustainability in India? Any of you panelists would like to answer that?
I can throw. I mean, there's a lot that we are doing in AI and agriculture globally across the world. Of course, the point Naganan made in terms of the very marginalized or the very small farm size is a big issue. But even having said that, right, there is work that has happened in terms of prediction of when a particular crop should be sown. It turns out that a few weeks positive or negative based on when the monsoon is coming, the soil moisture and other predictions can make a huge difference. Huge meaning as much as 30% difference in the yield of a crop. So prediction or advisory to when crops should be sown is an example. Similarly, early prediction of when pests might be, a crop might be getting susceptible to pest prediction, and therefore use of insecticide at the right time at the right level is another very important use of AI and the machine learning methods for agriculture. I mean, the use cases are across the board, and of course issues around data collection, low-cost sensors, drones, balloons. It's a range of ways to get data and then be able to offer those again to farmers who may not be literate, who may having, again to my earlier point about cognitive services, can you offer them in ways that are usable by a farmer who may not have all of digital capability. So yeah, so many uses in agriculture.
Great, thanks.
So just to add to that, see what is happening. One good change that's happening in agri-tech is you're getting a lot of FPOs now, right? Farmer producer organizations, where all of them are kind of they're forming an association so that you get larger land parcels. And with that, like to Rohini's point, I was talking to a startup that is doing pesticides or insecticides through drones. They require minimum 50-acre farm for that to be productive, right? And what they're also doing is they're providing this as a service. So you don't necessarily need the farmers to know how to operate drones. So I think there's a lot of models that are coming in and the technology is there. And then these drones, they also have very good computer vision capability. So they can, and they can see how much pesticides to dispense. And also, they have the capability of nozzles with the right amount of aerodynamics, so you can also spray underneath the leaf. I think there are a lot of advances that are being made, and then the changes are coming. You can't predict when, whether it's going to be the next 2 years, 5 years, or the next decade. I don't know. I don't know how to predict it. But I'll say, definitely you'll see all these changes coming. Because
and to add to that,
ITC and all those guys are deploying it like crazy, and ITC has such huge banks, and they're very, very actively looking for these kinds of solutions, right? And once they have it, the news will spread and more people will start using it.
I'm just going to add to Naganan's point that, the point you were earlier discussing about data, right? If you kind of have that out there and you're able to create that localized, prediction ability that allows people to have this kind of consortium to do things at a local level, then you have really unlocked a very different level of skill.
Okay, so I think we have maybe time for one last question, and we have from Yogesh. I don't think it's anyone to particular, but any of you or all of you would like to take a shot at it. He says, using raw data as is for learning, will it not overload the system and a waste of time? Can an alternate solution exist to classify the data and group them at the input level and then feed these cluster into the learning process? Will this not significantly reduce the load for deep learning in an AI model? Your opinion on this? Any of you would like to respond to this?
Well, Jogesh, you are right, but many a times, particularly in healthcare systems, you are not looking at a univariate data, right? So your data is multivariate. And so therefore grouping data, if you are grouping data at the pre-training level itself, then what's the point of AI at all? There is no point of classification, right? You have already known that, there are particular groups of data. Now, sometimes we have to do that. Like, for example, I will give you an example that's from a PET scanner data, with the kind of PET scanner that GE produces, right? And so there what happens is whenever there is a fault or an anomaly, typically the levels are not known. So when you do not know the levels, right, you don't have a choice. And then sometimes I think not having the levels is a better thing to do than having wrong levels, right? But the idea of grouping data into small clusters and so what you are essentially saying is that instead of feeding all the data points that belong to a cluster, why don't I feed a centroid of those data points? That usually doesn't work. Because, you are implicitly assuming a simplistic statistical which is normal, which means that you know the mean and you also know the variances around the mean, right? And so that you can characterize every data point belonging to that particular cluster. That would be I don't know what Rohini or Naganand has to say, but I think that's a pretty idealistic situation to imagine to begin with, and not at the deployment level.
Great. So I think in the interest of time, I would like to close the Q&A here and just go with a final round to all the panelists for kind of giving a 30-second spiel on where would they put their money in the future when it comes to the future of AI in general and the future of AI in India in terms of solving the India-specific problems. Like, what are the top 3 things that come to their mind in terms of problems or opportunities and so on? So, Snehanshu, would you like to go first?
Sure. Because I would really like to talk, specifically to India, right? Because we are not sitting in Harvard. So I would say, you try to drive your AI engine in low power, low compute regimes, right? So that the input cost to your research is very, very low. You also do some responsible research in the sense of try to, minimize your carbon emissions, right? And then please leave the state-of-the-art obsession out of the way. Right? It's not getting us anywhere with this state-of-the-art obsession, right? And instead of making confident mistakes in prediction, please, spend some time so that your models are interpretable at the model level, not post Hawk interpretability, but the model interpretability. Okay? I think the ecosystem, the problem is because of a lot of our obsession on the state of the art, the ecosystem between the academia and industry is stuck in an oscillating local minima. I strongly believe that. We are not going anywhere. We are not helping each other at all. Right? And that needs to be resolved. Okay? And industry should actually tell us that, look, I give you 100 rupees and you get me this within 100 rupees. So there is sort of like a hard constraint you put. And I think the Indian academicians respond very well to this situation. I'll give you one example. I don't know whether you are aware of that painting restoration project in the Hampi temple in the Vijayanagara kingdom. Okay, and this was done by a bunch of Indian computer vision researchers way back, and they have successfully restored a lot of the paintings on those temples. Okay, at a very, very low cost. So these are we have the skills, we have the knowledge, and we are in a position to solve these kind of problems. Right?
Great.
So that would be my
Thanks, Snehanshu. Rohini, would you like to go next?
I think the broad thematic that I would put my money on for the India specific use of AI is using AI for augmenting and really augmentation of our people capital using AI, and that thematic can actually go across sectors. You pick any sector and you try to think about how AI can be used to, let's pick education, how AI can be used to really bridge this gap between high quality teachers and educators who have that skill level to the place where the need is at scale, where teachers are potentially not very well trained, are potentially not very well equipped. If you want to bridge that divide, AI has so much potential in terms of really having that augmentation capability. And I can think of every sector where that thematic can be brought in using AI as an augmentation tool. That's what I would put my money on.
Yes. Rohini, I agree with you completely on this. Yeah.
Thanks, Rohini. Naganan, last words.
Yeah, so I think you will see some in the infrastructure play, in the edge computing, like what Snehanshu was saying. I think edge computing is becoming quite important, and I've seen actually developing FPGAs and chipsets for edge computing. So in the infrastructure layer, hopefully we'll see a few startups that kind of emanate that will help for edge processing of AI. And in the sectors, I think you will see a fairly well distributed across multiple sectors. But I think since there's a significant push in India in health, I would bet that you will see a lot of activity in the next 3-4 years in the health space because of what's happening in the health sector.
Well, thanks, Naganan, for sharing. And I would like to, with that, we'd like to wrap it up. And I think it's been wonderful talking to all the three of you, Rohini, Snehanshu, and Naganan. I think you brought a very different perspective, very complementary point of view there. But I'm sure we have a very mixed audience here, and they all got their ideas in terms of what might really make sense in terms of the opportunities. On behalf of IEEE volunteer team, I would like to thank you all for taking your time and effort and sharing your key wisdoms here with all of us there. And with that, I would like to kind of hand it over to our generals here, Puneet, for wrapping up today's day. Puneet, would you like to kind of share your thoughts at the end of the day?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much all the panelists as well as keynote speakers. And in addition to that, I would like to specifically thank TV sir for nicely moderating and excellently moderating the session. We started our talk with Vishal. He spoke very nicely and he brought a new concept of AI in AI. And then I went to Subarna. She talked about what is the missing middle. And then we came to understand from Ajay as well as Vishal about what the industry is thinking about advanced AI. At the end, there was a cherry on the cake with this panel discussion where Naganand, Rohini, and Snehanshu, they brought diversified perspective from venture capitalist point of view, industry point of view, as well as academia point of view, what they think that what is going to be the future of AI, and the two very specific to India. So overall, it was an excellent, I can say, panel as well as keynotes, and in this session of advanced in AI. Looking forward for tomorrow's session, which is going to be focused on AI for social good and ethical AI. Thank you one and all for joining us and providing us a wonderful perspective of yours.
Thanks for having us. I enjoyed the session. Thanks, TV, for moderating excellently, and thanks, Snehanshu and Rohini, for all the great inputs.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.